Good afternoon. Welcome to DDRC members, staff, and guests. Multiple staff members are present to make sure that the meeting runs smoothly and all applicants and citizens are able to communicate with the commission at the appropriate time. If you are here today and would like to speak about a case, please provide your name clearly into the microphone, and please be sure to sign in either at the back of the room or at the podium for documentation purposes. If you are here today to speak about a case, you must speak up when the chairperson calls for public comment.
Mr. Broom?
Here.
Mr. Greenberg?
Here.
Ms. Jaco?
Here.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Here.
And Mr. Salibi?
Here.
We have quorum.
Great. In order to avoid ex parte communications, DDRC members are under strict instructions not to discuss cases under consideration with the public or with each other outside of the public forum. The meeting typically starts with staff calling the case, giving a summary of the project, and then calling on the applicant to present if they wish. Decisions are typically made in one evening. Decisions may be appealed within 30 days to a court of competent jurisdiction. Oaths will be administered individually as we hear either from applicants or from live speakers. Applicants with requests before the DDRC are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time should include, but is not limited to, an overview of the project, case history, and any pertinent meetings held regarding the request. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicant, such as attorneys, engineers, and architects. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the DDRC or staff regarding request. Members of the general public are given the opportunity to address their concerns in intervals of 2 minutes. Applicants may have 5 minutes to respond. Staff has a timer and will make presenters aware of when their time has expired. Are there any changes to the agenda?
We've had one change to the agenda. Item number 3 on your current agenda, 2601 Cherry Street, request for a certificate of design approval for construction of 8 townhouses in the Old Chandon Lower Waverly Protection Area, Area A, has been moved from the regular agenda to the consent agenda with the agreement of the applicant. All conditions that staff, recommendations that staff made, they agreed to.
The DDRC uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. If a member of the DDRC or the general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda, that item is removed from the agenda and considered during the meeting. The DDRC then approves the remaining consent agenda. Will staff please review the consent agenda?
Certainly. The first item on the consent agenda is 1800 Senate Street, a request for preliminary certification of the Bailey Bill in the University Hill Architectural Conservation District. Second is 1417 Pickens Street, request for recommendation to City Council for landmark status for an individual structure in the City Center Design District. Item number 3 is the one we just mentioned, 2601 Cherry Street, request for a certificate of design approval for construction of 8 townhouses in the Old Chandon Lower Waverly Protection Area, Area A. And that would be the consent agenda.
Is there anyone from the DDRC that would like to have any item removed from the consent agenda? All right. Is there anyone from the public that would like an item to be removed from the consent agenda? Because we will not be discussing those cases once we approve the consent agenda. Okay. All right. Do I have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda, subject to all the conditions and also the June minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda and the June meeting minutes.
Second.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg? Yes. Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Yes.
And Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, now we can move forward to the regular agenda. And the first case at Hugh G. Street, before we start the description, Commissioner Lee Decker has something he wants to share.
Thank you. Before we get into this case, I would like to address an issue concerning the case that's entered the public domain by way of an article in yesterday's edition of the state newspaper. The article states that my wife, Carolyn Liedecker, initiated a letter-writing campaign to mobilize opposition to the request we're about to consider. My concern is that this story may have led to speculation that I discussed this project with my wife or others while this case was pending, which would be a violation of my responsibility to avoid ex parte communication, which, if true, would jeopardize the integrity of the Commission's decision process. So let me present a few facts. My wife and I do communicate about many topics: politics, popular culture, maintenance issues in the neighborhood, and she is president of our Homeowners Association and the Vista Neighborhood Association. And both these organizations are very engaged in new developments in our neighborhood. There is a lot of discussion about new development in our neighborhood, often involving cases that come before this commission. But I want to assure my fellow commissioners, the DDRC staff, city council members who voted to appoint me to this commission, the general public, and applicants with cases that come before this commission, past, present, and future, that my wife and I both clearly understand and respect the rule against ex parte communication. I take my responsibilities on this commission seriously, and those who have worked with me know that I spend a fair amount of time researching the cases on our agendas. I regret that yesterday's news article may have led to speculation that our process might have been corrupted. Going forward, Carolyn and I have discussed the need to avoid any statements that might lead anyone to suspect that our proceedings might be influenced by improper discussion of pending cases.
All right, thank you. Move over to staff to present the case.
Certainly. Pardon me. So the first case is, this is 1043 UG Street. This is in the Innovista Design District and is a request for certificate of design approval for changes to an approved design. So just as a background and project summary, a 5-story, 130-room hotel was reviewed and approved by the DDRC for this property in November of 2020 and subsequently obtained a land disturbance permit for the development plan. Since the property was sold to a new developer who is also proposing to build a hotel. The new applicant came before the DDRC in June 2024, last month, to request a certificate of design approval for a revised building design for a 4-story, 123-room hotel with the same site plan that was approved previously at the corner of UG and Senate Streets. The DDRC approved the new proposal with a number of conditions, including the elimination of the Senate Street vehicular driveway. The applicant has determined that the elimination of the Senate Street vehicular access is not a viable option for the development and is requesting the DDRC to consider a change to the June 2024 approved design, which is to allow for the Senate Street driveway to remain in the plan. Since the applicant is vested in the previously approved site-specific development plan, they may move forward with building that design in its entirety to include the Senate Street vehicular drive. There's a few a little bit of information in the packet that references the master plan and has a couple of guidelines related to that. I won't go through all of that today, but Graham Rambo, the applicant, is here to present the request and to answer questions of the commission.
All right, thank you. Would the applicant like to come forward? Hi, just speak clearly in the microphone. If you could state your name, please.
Hello, my name is Graham Rambo.
And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you all for your time this evening. Came to speak about this project and give a little more background. The Hugie Street entrance or access, SCDOT is requiring that we add a concrete median there. So that Hugie Street will be a right-in, right-out access. So as we analyze the request last month's meeting, there's no good place for cars to turn around. If you, let's say you're coming from Blossom on Hugie and you want to go left into the hotel, you would either have to go up to Gervais, take a left, go down to Williams, take a left, then go to Senate, take a left, go back up to Senate, go right. If we can assume we have the same amount of traffic flow with the entrance or without it. By eliminating this entrance, we will actually add to congestion in the immediate surrounding areas and will actually be hurting traffic. So that's one point I wanted to make. The other one was, or two other ones. Barnett Oil, the previous business that operated on this site for over 50 years, had Senate Street access. So this is technically not a new access. We are reactivating the access that they had. They have been closed for a number of years. I think they closed in 1994 is the information I have. So it has been closed a while. But prior to 1994, that business that operated there for 50 years had access onto Senate Street. I did reach out to the fire department. The fire marshal is not in favor of deleting the Senate Street access because it could possibly impede access to the hotel for emergency service personnel. The bottom line for our team as we analyzed it is we don't see building this hotel without the Senate Street access. We prefer to build the four-story version we've presented to you that has less height, less density. But if we analyze it and we're not able to build this version, then to us, as we look at the two options, it would probably be better for us to go back to the 2020 version that is more height and more density, but does have the Senate Street access. So it just asks that y'all approve the four-story, less height, less density. The version we're trying to build is actually less than the vested rights we have to build. And I would ask that y'all approve the Senate Street access. Thank you for your time.
Right, so thank you. I'll just keep you 1 second, because I want to make sure this is clear for the commissioners, what the applicant is saying. He is requesting to take what we approved last month, but allow the Senate Street access, okay? Because if not, then they would go back to the original version that was improved, and staff can tell me exactly when, which had the different version, the lower leveled or whatever, and has the Senate Street access in it, which was already approved, okay? So I just want to make sure everybody understands the situation.
Thank you for clarifying, Chairwoman. Is that the case, or would the version we approved at last month's meeting take precedent?
No, because they got their land disturbance permit after the original DDRC approval, they are vested with that site-specific development plan. They would just have to build it as it was designed at that time. So it'd be that building design and that site plan as one development proposal.
Thank you.
Is there,
I'm ready to address this. I think this request brings us to the edge of a procedural and legal quagmire. We're looking at a request to reconsider or amend an action from our June 20th meeting where we voted to approve a Certificate of Design Approval, CDA, with conditions, one of which was elimination of the Senate Street access. Now, we're hearing a request to reverse that decision, phrased as, in the staff words, request for a Certificate of Design Approval for changes to an approved design, close quote. And we had the same language in a case 2 months ago involving a car wash on Gervais Street. In that case, a contractor installed a metal roof instead of a shingle roof as were required by CDA. And what happened was, at the conclusion of inspection, staff discovered the error and came back to the commission to try to solve what's the best way to deal with this. In this case, the staff is asking us, or the applicant is asking us, to change a decision we've already made. And I'm really curious why we're using this convoluted phrasing, a request for Certificate of Design Approval for changes to an approved design. It, to me, looks like an attempt to overturn our decision without using the term appeal. This request clearly fits within the definition of an appeal as understood in our normal process of reviewing proposals for CDAs.
so Commissioner, let me just pause a second, because I heard you even say something, and I've read a lot of those public comments, and there was one thing that concerned me, and there is this perception that city staff is driving this process, and they're not. The commissioners have been driving this process. And so we have a situation, obviously, where we had approved something a couple of years ago, and then based upon the conversation last month, we expressed, which, I know what we did, so I just want to clarify that the commissioners are the one kind of driving this process, nobody else, correct? Is that what
Commission
you're?
is
The
doing,
DDRC has been driving this.
well, there's a request in front of the commission to
Right.
take an action.
Correct.
So it's the applicant, and I assume with support of city staff, that's requesting this. Can I just proceed with my?
Okay, well, I'm trying to make sure I understand who we're talking about. Okay.
Well, the request before us is to amend a decision that we made on June 20th. To me, when I see a creature that has feathers, a bill, and webbed feet, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and swims like a duck, I can confidently say it's a duck. This is a request to change a decision we've made. It's an appeal, and we have specific language in our guidelines and procedures about how we handle appeals. Every meeting that we have opens with a statement, decisions may be appealed within 30 days to a court of competent jurisdiction. We heard that again a few minutes ago. We have an appeal process that's laid out in the city's Unified Development Ordinance. The process is in it's figure 17.2.5 H5, Summary of a Certificate of Design Approval, Design District's Major Procedure. After we make a decision, which we did last month, there's an optional appeal. The language that accompanies that process is, an appeal from the DDRC's decision may be made by any person having a substantial interest in the decision or any officer or agent of the city to the county circuit court in accordance with SC Code Section 6-29-900 at SEC. The appeal must be filed within 30 days after the affected party receives actual notice of the decision of the DDRC. We have a flow chart that's in all of our neighborhood guidelines that clearly shows after we make a review and decision, there's a binary path. Either the applicant gets the approval and moves ahead with the project according to any conditions that we attach to the recommendation of the CDA, or it's an appeal to circuit court. I like to have you guys just refresh and look at this.
Can I just ask for clarification? So is your point then, either they appeal the last month's decision, or it sounds like
Well,
they
they
can
proceed-
revert to the prior decision, which is what I think that's where
Prior
I'm
decision, 2022, I've also seen in our neighborhood guidelines, decisions expire after one calendar year. So to go back and say, well, we got a decision 2020 and we're going to reuse that. This project came to us as a fresh case, and we heard it on June 20th, and we made a decision. We considered the relevant guidelines. We considered the facts. We made a decision.
Can we get staff clarification on that real quick? That the decisions become invalid after one calendar year?
Well, DDRC approvals are good for 2 calendar years, and then when a project gets a permit, that vests the project with that site-specific development plan. So that the previous approval from 2020 is a vested plan, can be built tomorrow if they chose to do that. The way that staff approached, typically appeals are for when a project is denied. I'm not going to, wax about legal decisions, whether this could or could not have been appealed. I think that oftentimes when a project gets approved at DDRC, and there's a number of reasons during a design development process where changes may happen to a design that may require that it come back to the DDRC. I think that in this case, it just happened to be that the applicant, the developer, wasn't here because the request last month was primarily about architectural design. So the architect was here, and didn't have enough information, I guess, to answer when the DDRC asked the question about whether this would be an acceptable change. And so we have more information now to consider.
I understand.
So that's why it's being presented this way.
Made a decision based on the information we had.
So then what you're saying is there is a distinction between what is appealable, which is either a granting or a denying of an application, or a certificate of design approval, versus recommendations made to staff for that certificate of design approval. I mean, I'm just trying to understand the distinction you're making.
I think yes.
I'll continue with this. We get appeals all the time. Everybody has a right to appeal our decision. We see a lot of appeals from applicants who have been denied by staff. I've not seen an appeal of a DDRC decision come back to DDRC. We're being asked to adjudicate a decision that we made. That's kind of questionable from a legal
Well, I think the
point of
distinction
view.
staff is making is that we granted the certificate, and now it's just slightly changing the certificate, similar to what we did a few months ago with the car wash, right? Where, I guess in that case, they came back to say, well, we've developed the site not in accordance with the certificate, and instead of appealing after the fact, that certificate, they came back to us asking for a change of the recommendations, which we approved. And so I guess ultimately what you're trying to get at is this shouldn't even be up for consideration. And so then you're
getting
suggesting
exactly
denial.
what I'm saying. We're opening ourselves to legal issues. There's a strict written procedure in the city's development code that says how appeals are handled. And by all appearance, this is a request to change our decision. And by any other name, that's an appeal. So here's where I'm landing on this. If we do this, if we reopen and adjudicate the question of the Senate Street entrance, we're effectively creating an alternate appellate process. We're hearing an appeal, we're re-adjudicating it, we're intruding on the prerogative of the circuit court, and we're going outside the process that's outlined in the city's development code. So I'm very reluctant to entertain even a discussion of the Senate Street entrance, as many merits as it may have, and I understand the circumstances, but
Well, that's an interesting point. Would it be prudent to defer this matter until city staff has had an opportunity to consult with legal counsel?
it's a legal question. And at this point, I would be very reluctant to have us even entertain this. What I'm thinking is, I don't know, to put you on the spot, Madam Chair, but we can rule this request as out of order, but if we vote on it, again, a formal commission vote, that's a committee action. Then, is that appealable then in 30 days, within the 30-day? I mean, we're just opening up to a very, very sticky situation if we take a vote on this.
Well, can I get some more clarification on the prior approval, and what about this new site plan necessitated the removal of the Senate Street entrance? Is there any more background on that?
It was a request made by a commissioner, and it was a motion that passed last month. It was a condition that was added to the recommended approval process.
I can address that a little bit.
I think, is the question, why did we grant the Senate Street access in the 2020 decision?
Well, the question is, why was it denied after a prior approval?
It was denied on the basis of reviewing the Innovista Design District guidelines, which explicitly say not to put an entrance on this street.
Wasn't it also granted based on those guidelines previously?
Yes.
It was based on a violation of those guidelines previously, yes, but that was a 2-year-old decision. We had a fresh proposal, a fresh packet to look at in June.
Don't we have to stand on precedent, though? I mean, if it was...
Yes,
if it
we
was
have to stand on precedent, and if we create a new precedent, I don't know where we're going to stand on this alternate appeals process.
Well, as commissioners, don't we have wide latitude to determine if it substantially complies with the guidelines and if there was a prior approval for the specific site, for the specific use?
We can change our proceedings, our guidelines, but I don't think we can go outside what's mandated in the city's Unified Development Code without intruding on what the council has done.
Well, as commissioners, I think we do vote whether or not the site plan substantially complies, and we are afforded some latitude, and at some point in the past 4 years or 3 years, whatever the actual date was, it was approved. Do we have minutes from that meeting?
I don't have the minutes with me, no. I mean, they exist, but we don't have the minutes, but it was approved.
I mean, my concern is that this is probably going to get appealed either way.
We can resolve it tonight without appeals or lawyers.
Well, so city staff, you say that they could proceed with the larger, more impactful development design that was previously approved, but a scaled-back version cannot proceed with the Senate Street entrance?
Well, that's up to the DDRC this evening. The applicant is choosing, my understanding is the applicant is choosing if the driveway decision comes tonight that the driveway will not be allowed, then they are vested and are able to build the design that was approved in 2020. They're vested in that design because they have a land disturbance permit for a site-specific development plan that includes the driveway.
Can we hear a little bit about this concept of vesting? Is that a formal agreement that's between the developer and the previous developer?
I think our permit on it, it says our permit is good until 2027. So once we actually get the permit to build out the plan that was approved, we have every vested right to build out that project until that permit
The
expires.
permit from the city, just
Correct. I have a City of
clarify where it
Columbia
comes from.
building
Yeah.
permit that doesn't expire until 2027.
Vesting is based on both city ordinances and state law. This is confirmed as a vested project, the 2020 approvals. And I think anything beyond that about the process that we're going through, if we need to get legal advice, then we aren't going to get it tonight because we don't have our city attorneys or the DDRC attorney here. So this is, we determined that this was a request for a change to an approved design. If there's some question about that process, then we probably need to consult legal attorneys because we are not those.
It's not a request for a change to an approved design, it's an appeal, okay?
On an appeal.
So there's
I wanted to present more information tonight that y'all didn't. I wanted to present information and be here and speak to it. Really, if there was a legal irregularity, it was the fact that last month it went as a new submission anyway. In my mind, and speaking to different people, it should have never been a new submission. It should have been a modification of the previously approved plan, because we weren't asking for changing the site. We were trying to make the building shorter and less rooms, less height and less density. And so there's just no need to go on this whole lawyer train when it's not needed. I just ask that y'all approve us doing the Senate Street, and we'll build out the less height and less density project. We are frankly out of time. We spent 3 months back and forth doing this, and if it is deferred, I mean, what I've been told by my bosses is that we won't be coming back. We're gonna build out the 5-story version. And so if the concern of the neighborhood is traffic, it would make sense to me for y'all to approve us from doing the Senate Street access, and we'll build it at 4 stories, which is less height, less density than what we have previously vested and approved.
So to clarify the record, we have two approvals in this case. We have an approval in 2020 with the permit that's good through 2027, and we have an approval last month. The difference between those approvals, I guess, is scale and then access from Senate Street. So we have 2 approvals. Neither of those applications were denied. Is that correct?
We're not denied, correct.
They were approvals with conditions, yes.
Okay. And so, but isn't the DDRC within its capacity to issue amendments to those site plans if it wasn't an outright denial?
That's our understanding, yes.
The chart that I'm looking at, it's after an approval, the applicant continues in building permit process. Is this not part of the building permit process?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The chart I'm looking at in the Section 1 administration review process, after an approval, the applicant continues in building permit process. Is this still in the building permit process?
Well, the 2020 design got their land disturbance permit because this was just approved last month. I mean, they have not submitted a building permit application yet.
So this would still be within that process? A change to the plan that was previously approved?
Well,
Yes.
let's be clear that the turning lane on Senate is under the jurisdiction of DOT, okay? It's not, unless you have to pay for it, it's not your problem, your project. It's what the DOT says. There is another proposal out to widen that median and allow left turns going north on Hugie into Senate. There is no possibility of that now, so.
You can see it. They're making, basically all along Hugie, that will be a concrete median. So there'll be no opportunity, if you're driving from Blossom on Hugie, there'll be no opportunity to get into the property.
Yeah,
without-
I understand that. I drive up there. That concrete median is not built.
Correct, they're making us build it. Like DOT is making our,
DOT has different prerogatives than different agencies, so I don't know if we're going to get anywhere with this, but I do have serious concerns about setting a precedent. How do we handle appeals? And I don't think there's any way we can view this as anything but an appeal of our decision.
Yeah, I just don't see it as an appeal. I see it as part of the building process. I mean, it's a dynamic process. Plans change, they evolve. I think we're here. I think we should hear the change request. This wasn't a denial. It can be appealed the other way as well. If someone finds that there was some sort of procedural error in our decision to hear this change, it can be appealed.
Well, the procedural error would be to revote on it today.
I just don't see it as a revote. I mean, this is an approval. It's a change to the site plan. It's within the building process.
Have we had a situation like this before, Amy? I'm just trying to think of how to correctly maneuver.
No, not.
I mean, not exactly like this. I mean, we have had changes come back to the DDRC.
Right, yeah, I mean, we've definitely received changes. I mean, I guess we could take a vote as to whether or not to proceed discussing the case. Help me out here. I'm just trying to figure out how to correctly follow the rules. Okay,
I would make a motion for DDRC to hear this change request to a previously approved.
okay. And do I have a
I'll
second?
second that.
All right. Take a vote.
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg,
Yes.
Ms. Jaco,
Yes?
Mr. Lee Decker,
No.
Mr. Salibi.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, so we'll move forward to discuss the case. So Commissioner Greenberg, you weren't here last month, so pretty much they presented the new design last month, which pretty much had all the same conditions from before. And that's when the discussion came up with the guidelines and Senate Street. But I don't know, is there anything else you'd like to share or add to the commissioners at this point that you have already stated?
already said it all.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure, is there anything else you'd like to ask the applicant before we move on?
I would just like to be directed to the relevant section about access, just to have a moment to read the language of the guidelines.
Can you state that again? I didn't hear that clearly. Can you repeat it, please?
I would just like to be directed to the relevant section of the guidelines to read the language, specific language about access from A and B streets.
Circulation component here?
Right.
You're talking about language in the design district guidelines.
Yes.
I was going to ask staff too. Can I see the sign-in sheet? Do we have people signed in to speak on this case as well?
question to Commissioner Ledecker. So based on what you said, and I know precedent is important, you referred back to the car wash case we considered a few months ago. In that case, the development proceeded not in conformance with the certificate of design approval we granted. They came back to us asking for an amendment to that so that how they developed the site would come within approval, or I guess come within the certificate's approval. So is what you're suggesting, or I guess would an unintended consequence of what you're suggesting be that in that case, they could not come back asking for an amendment, but they would have to appeal potentially in the meantime, while the appeal is pending, stop operating their business?
This case was presented as a contractor misread the plans, and there was an accident or an omission or an error. And it was, all right, staff noticed the error and comes back to the DDRC and says, well, they didn't put shingles on. Is there an acceptable paint that's going to work on this type of metal, or is it, what color shingles do you want, or can we paint the roof? It wasn't like getting a new certificate of design. It was just, how do we fix this screw up?
Well, we're referring to non-conforming uses, and I guess how far can we go, right? I mean, is changing the color of paint on a roof acceptable for reconsideration, but then creating a new entrance to a parking lot is something you have to appeal? Because I'm trying to understand the distinction in your mind.
We could have insisted that the contractor tear off the metal roof and put on shingle roof. We didn't. This is a case that has a little bit more significance. Traffic vehicle entrances, strict conformance with the design district guidelines that govern development in this area. I don't think on the Gervais Street car wash, there was it's a 5 Points overlay district. It doesn't say thou shalt use asphalt shingles on the roof. It wasn't a violation of the design district guidelines or standards. It was just okay, we put the wrong material on here. So in this case, we're talking about there's a specific design district standard. That's how we made our decision about the vehicle entrance. What we're considering now after the vote is whether or not we're going to violate that for whatever reason.
Understood. Thank you for the explanation.
I think we have a couple of people from the public that want to speak on the case, but do you have some clarifications or questions for staff?
Yeah, my question is, was this the only portion of the guidelines that has been an issue in this case? Meaning were all of the other design aspects consistent with the guidelines?
So generally, when we review cases, we write the evaluations and include all of the guidelines that are relevant to the project. Oftentimes, there are some that meet closely, don't meet. I mean, it's usually a combination of things. And at the end of the day, the recommendation is based on whether a project substantially meets the design guidelines. That's how staff typically evaluates a project. There were a number of conditions that were recommended as part of the approval. The motion was made to approve the project with those conditions, and there were two other conditions added by DDRC members. One of them had to do with materials, and one of them had to do with the driveway entrance. So, and there are a lot of times where changes will come, or applicants realize during the course of their design development that they can't do something that was approved. And sometimes it's small, and staff actually approves those without coming back to DDRC. If it's significant, we'll usually bring it back to the DDRC to consider. And I did want to mention, does that help answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Just if you're getting into public comment, I just wanted to acknowledge for the record that we did get public comments from 4 people regarding this case. So I just wanted to mention those. Ted Fettner sent an email, Paul Gaffney, William Neglia, and Daryl Williams. So those emails were received and forwarded to the commission. You guys should have those as of yesterday, I believe. So just for the record.
Okay.
If we're going to debate SCDOT's requirement, I see a statement in the staff report, the last statement just before staff recommendation, page 2. Staff did get some feedback from SCDOT, and while they cannot require that an access drive be provided from Senate, they do prefer it as a safer option of ingress and egress from the site. I don't think that says SCDOT is requiring this. They're saying, well, we prefer that you don't do it. So it's our discretion. It's not we're not going to
Nobody's saying the
violate a
DOT is requiring
requirement
it,
of
partly because Senate Street
SCDOT.
is a city street, so they can't require the access be on.
Yeah.
I just asked the question to have more information for the commission. They said they prefer having the entrance and exit on a street that is lower volume, lower speed. That's a safer configuration from the DOT standpoint. It was just more information to consider.
Well, SCDOT is not requiring this. It's their preference.
There was some mention at the last month's meeting about wanting a traffic study. So while this project, that is beyond the purview of the DDRC to require a traffic study. Traffic engineers look at every proposal that comes into the city. They determine whether a traffic study is required or not. A traffic study is being done for the Williams Street project for this entire area. That's not part of this project, and nor is that something the DDRC typically looks at. So this was just an anecdotal information from the DOT to provide you guys with some additional information to consider.
Is there any other questions of the applicant at this point?
At this point, no.
Okay, I want to just want. Thank you. It appears that maybe 2 individuals signed up to speak on this case. Is there more than 2? I see 1 hand, I see 2 hands. Okay, so just want to make sure. So whoever would like to come up first. And when you get up, just make sure the microphone is as close to you as possible. Thank you.
Is that
Please
good?
state your name.
My name's Mary Langston, and I live in City Club.
And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
Through the entire, yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, 50 years ago is not today. 50 years ago, the Vista was not the Vista of today, with a vibrant arts community, restaurants, shops, and numerous tourists and residents who have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars paying taxes to the city. It was an empty lot. There was I think it was a gas building that was there, and a part of the university had a lab there. When we moved there in 2007, that was all that was there. Dupree took over Sterling Gardens, if you know where that is. Right now, the traffic in that area, it's a neighborhood now. The Girl Scouts building is there, which also has a lot of traffic and small children. Dupree has numerous events there. The hotel, which was just built, which is an eyesore to the city, have not followed what they said that they would do. They've already caused problems with traffic and the drainage in the area. On the other side of the property that this building is being discussed for is local business, the One-Eared Cow, which has been a successful small business for decades, and Stormwater Studios, which opened a few years ago, along with the creek that feeds into the Congaree River. I believe my understanding from the InterVista guidelines for the roads is the same thing that we've talked about before, using major streets as opposed to the small side streets. Our neighborhood is surrounded by Gervais Street, Gist Street, William Street, or Senate Street and William Street. I feel like you guys, as well as the citizens, are almost being hijacked or threatened by saying, well, if you don't agree to this, then we're going to do that, which wasn't what was approved before. There's also different people that own that property now, different rules, I would think. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next speaker. Come on up.
Gordon Langston?
Great, and do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
Yes.
Thank you.
Our major problem with that area is that the traffic on that street is going to be a major problem. It's a B street, it's not supposed to have an entrance on it, and that's been it's in the rules, and that seems to be, people just ignore, it's been ignored for the one other hotel, the True Hotel, and now it's going to be ignored for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? All right, I'm open up to commissioners. Any comments or follow-up with the applicant or thoughts?
I guess I would like a little more detail on the communication with SCDOT, that they suggested that providing access off that street would make it safer and better access for pedestrians. Is that correct?
No, that was just in general. They are typically looking at just vehicular traffic entrances, and just a lower volume, lower speed street is generally a better place for driveways. It was just a brief conversation, since there is no traffic study. But they don't own Senate Street, so they can't require that the entrance be in one location or another.
I think the DOT is exclusively, possibly concerned only with vehicle safety. I attended a training earlier in June and learned that the Columbia metropolitan area is one of the top 20 worst cities for pedestrian fatalities in the United States. Well, we're better than just the top 20. We're the 12th worst in the nation. So it is a question of pedestrian safety, not just moving as many cars per minute as possible. The master plan envisions Senate Street as a street for pedestrian use. If we want to turn it into a high automobile traffic thing, that violates the intent and vision of the Univista master plan and the guidelines.
Commissioners, any other comment?
I would just like to say there's been a lot of talk about precedent. It seems like the hearing last month, we sort of broke from precedent. I mean, for this specific site and other projects in the Univista Design District, I mean, I think the guidelines are intended to help promote responsible development, but not to curtail development at all. I just don't see how this site could be developed to anything but, a vacant lot without access from Senate Street. And I think that's why the guidelines do provide leeway to determine whether or not there's substantial compliance, not, to the letter of the language, but overall, does the plan conform with the general intent of those guidelines? So I think I'm just confused as to why access wasn't allowed after it had previously been approved for the exact same site.
You're talking about last month's discussion? And I think the question came up, was that a possibility? And at the time, as they mentioned, the architect was here and said, yes, we can explore that. And that is kind of how we ended it. So I'm assuming now we're hearing that the exploration has come back, and unless we can ask the applicant to clarify that. But I think we're right back to where we originally were.
Referring to precedent, can staff remind us that the circumstances surrounding our granting of access off of Senate Street for the existing hotel that's been referenced?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
What were the circumstances surrounding our decision for granting A Street access for the hotel close to the current site being considered?
You mean the 2020 approval for this site?
No, for the True Hotel.
I don't have that in front of me. I can't address that specifically right now.
That situation was one where there was a non-public meeting with the DOT, and as a result of the public opposition to putting entrances on Williams and Senate, DOT came out of it convinced that it would be impossible to reach the site from those two entrances where they should have been, which that was never in a public hearing.
Any other clarifications? No, down there, okay. I mean, I can open it up for a motion. Somebody's gonna have to make a motion of some sort.
I would make a motion to approve the request for certificate of design approval for changes to the approved design in accordance with staff recommendations and our precedent, and also finding that the site plan does substantially comply with the Innovista design guidelines as best as possible for this particular site.
Need a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg? Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Mr. Lee Decker?
No.
Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next case.
When I came on board, that's 2000.
Oh, yeah.
And the city was saying the company. And that's we have more people.
All right, sorry, yes.
All right, this is 1803 Emery Avenue. It's a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill and for a certificate of design approval for an addition. This project came before DDRC at last month's meeting to build an addition off the back of the house, 2 stories behind the main core of the house, and a smaller 1-story extension behind the enclosed sunroom. And at that time, the DDRC ruled to defer review and recommended that if this is brought back before the DDRC, more information be provided. In particular, that the guideline B3 be in great consideration regarding the limit of size and scale of the addition so that it is clearly subordinate to the original structure. Since the June meeting, the applicant has adjusted the design to better differentiate the old from the new with the use of a hyphen to connect the mass of the addition to the historic house. The overall design is intended to reflect the character of the historic house using stucco, roof details, and windows to match. The applicant is also applying for the Bailey Bill as part of the renovation of this property. The scope of work for the Bailey Bill includes re-roofing, stucco repairs, painting, and HVAC, plumbing, and electrical updates. Above the top picture is the original submittal, which is much more monolithic in design. The bottom drawing is the current revised submittal. And just to clarify, a hyphen is kind of a sucked-in, smaller part of an addition attached to an addition that then widens out typically. And that's a normal way to differentiate additions from historic structures. And it was discussed at the last meeting as being a good option for this property. So while the addition is large and highly visible from the street on a corner lot, the addition is offset from the historic house with the hyphen, which separates the mass of the original from the mass of the historic. And the hyphen clearly delineates the addition as secondary to the historic house. Likewise, this house, while the addition is large, the house itself is not out of scale for the neighborhood, with houses that range from anywhere from 2,500 square feet to 6,500 square feet in the immediate area, with other houses in the neighborhood up to 13,000 square feet. Generally speaking, the sizes of the houses correspond with the size of their associated lots, and this house is quite small for its lot. You can see it there, kind of in green, if you can see that, on that large lot. The current square footage of the house is about 2,500 square feet, and the addition is proposed to be about 2,500 square feet. So overall, the house will be close to 5,000 square feet, which is not unsimilar from its neighbors who, again, range up to 6,500 square feet nearby. Examples have been provided to the DDRC of square footage of additions at nearby houses. One example that staff will share is 1802 Seneca Avenue. And if you look at this slide and go up from 1803, the house at 1802 Seneca Avenue is on the same block in the opposite corner. You can see how this house on this lot relates to the proposed addition and historic house at 1803 Emery Avenue. It does run along Watery Avenue. The 1802 Seneca Street has about an 80-foot or more street frontage on Watery Avenue. This one will have about 68 feet. And the overall square footage of both houses is very similar with their additions. Additionally, here it is kind of tried to portray what it will look like on the lot in conjunction with its neighbors if the addition were to be approved. So you can see the scale of the 1803 Emery house near its neighbors. Additionally, questions have been raised as to the applicability of the Bailey Bill to a property with a large addition. Staff showed an example at the last meeting of a house in Cottontown that more than doubled the square footage of the original house and was approved by the DDRC for the Bailey Bill. As another note, many of our buildings that come forward for Bailey Bill incentive are also applying for National Historic Tax Credits. Tax credits are reviewed and approved by the National Park Service, who set the nation's standards for historic preservation. National Park Service review is much more stringent than local Bailey Bill review, and they have a purview over items that are not even visible from the public right-of-way. And I mention this because a National Park Service review addition at the Historic Armory Building at 1219 Assembly Street was approved, and it is more than double the size of the historic building. This project was approved for the Bailey Bill and for National Historic Tax Credits by the National Park Service. And although this is a commercial building, a commercial example, the review criteria for the Bailey Bill does not differ when looking at commercials and residential buildings. This too was a highly visible addition because of the number of parking lots that surround the building, so staff did have a high level of review over this one as well. One of the most important standards for additions is that the addition be differentiated from the old, and as the Bailey Bill standard states, that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. In this case, the hyphen included as part of the addition helps the project to meet this standard, delineating old from new in a way that could be reversed in the future. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of both the CDA for the addition and for the Bailey Bill, with conditions including historic materials on the house will be maintained and preserved with repairs in kind if needed. This includes keeping original windows, doors, woodwork, and stucco on the exterior. And if any features are found to be highly deteriorated during the course of repairs, staff will be notified to evaluate the condition and ensure that any replacement materials are in keeping with the standards. Additionally, details on the addition will mimic the look of the historic house, including stucco, roofing, eave, window, and foundation details. That windows will be aluminum clad with exterior muntins to match the design of the profile of the historic windows, with the final window design to be approved by staff prior to purchase. And that the parking pad area, driveway, and all paving details will be approved by staff once it's, well, with the new site plan. And then all other details deferred to staff. Do you have any questions?
Does any, strange. Anybody have any questions for staff before? Is the applicant here?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, Phil, we can close the door. I think they're vacuuming out there, or suctioning. Yes, please come on up. Come on up and please state your name.
My name is Benedict Atapitis.
You can raise the microphone up a little bit so we can hear you better.
Benedict Atapitis.
And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to share with the commissioners, or are you just here to answer questions?
Answer questions. I heard the neighborhood came out last month, so
Right.
address any concerns they have.
I'm going to open it up because I know there was a big discussion last month about this and some of the comments.
I can't understand it. You need to speak a little louder.
Just try to speak as loud as you can into the microphone.
So I'm here to answer any questions the neighborhood has, that's all.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant themselves? Commissioner Lee Decker, did you have any questions? Just make sure your microphone's on too.
I do have some comments about the design, but I'm not sure whether we're going to hear from the public first or whether we're going to discuss the,
Well, just our protocols, typically, if we have any questions to clarify with the applicant, we would do
Okay.
that first. And it doesn't appear, he doesn't have anything to present, he's just here to answer questions, so I'm going to open up.
So we're in deliberating this, okay.
Well, we're discussing it, if you got anything.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
I guess, you know, coming out of last month's meeting, I don't know if you were here or not.
I wasn't here.
June 20th, the big issue was with the detail of the drawings, and it was, the drawings that we see are not like fully detailed architectural drawings, so it's difficult to really understand what the proposal is. The other big issue was under this criterion B3, whether or not this addition is, whether it reads as subordinate in scale to the original house. So I think we've heard the comment about the hyphen, and I look at this and the fenestration, the window pattern, the size, it, to me, doesn't look like it is subordinate. It's almost the same size, it may be bigger. When you go up, is it Watery Street? I think the street, it's not a right angle. The setback is a little closer. And I think there's no topo in this submission, but I think there's a survey received in the public comments. And some of the photos suggest that the ground's a little bit lower to the back. So the effect might be that this addition actually looks larger than the original house. I'm not a professional architect, but I look at this and it's like, well, these are almost like conjoined twins. It's not a subordinate structure. One thing maybe the staff could address is we looked at the Cottontown example. I'm not sure that came up on the screen. We looked at that in June where there was a big rear addition, and it was very clear that the addition, you know, is distinct in materials from the original structure. The image you just showed of the armory, it reads as two, you know, the original and the addition read as very differently. Here, I guess the idea is to try to be compatible with the original structure by replicating the stucco, the window pattern and everything, but I think there may be a medium where it's too much of a mimicry of the original. It doesn't read as a subordinate or different structure. The setback to me, I drove up and I looked at the street, and it's a corner lot. And I think since this addition will be most visible from Watery, that's the principal elevation we should be reviewing. That street is a really nice-looking street, but it's narrow. It's only, I think, 50 feet wide. There's a lot of mature trees. There's a lot of landscaping. And I think that putting this essentially at this, the setback is going to be a little bit less. The property survey had it a maybe 3-foot difference from front to back. It's more of a wedge than a rectangle, your property. So I have a suggestion that, if you move this back towards up the street, it would be less obtrusive, maybe not any smaller, but to push it back a little bit, and you'd have room for some landscaping to soften the sort of overall large appearance of the structure.
Are you suggesting he makes the addition narrower? You're suggesting he makes it narrower?
And move it back.
Off the street?
Push
'Cause
it back
if you
away from Watery Street, because it looks like from the plat, there's plenty of room in the backyard there that's kind of open.
There is. But generally speaking, when you're looking at the front of a house, you do not want to see any part of the addition, which is why he has it placed where it is. Because the side addition, you would be, like, if the mass it is now was pushed out to the side, it would jut out to the side of the house, and you would see it from the principal facade. So in order to do what you're suggesting, the addition would have to be narrowed, which you can
Well,
suggest.
that's my point, is it's going to be most visible from Watery. To protect a view from Enery, you're going to have a very major visual impact on Watery. Did I get that wrong? Yeah.
That's true. But we have always interpreted the guidelines as you're looking at the principal facade, you do not want to see any part of the addition. And the principal facade is the front. Obviously, it's highly visible, but that's always the case on a corner lot.
So Commissioner, I did think, one question you were asking the applicant, and I don't know if you have any type of drawings that show it with the topography or what that side view looks like. Do you have anything like that? Or have you done anything like that?
From what he just said, the solution, if not to be so intrusive from Watery, would be on Watery to make a one-story addition, and then at the back of it be the two-story addition. So, because as of now, from Watery is a two-story, and then, going in the property is a one-story. So it could be a one-story on Watery, and then just, some space, and then you have the two-story, if you know what I'm talking about.
If you did move it back and we go through with the, almost complete mimicry of materials, it's not going to be that much of an intrusion from the principal facade on Enery. So
I don't mind moving it back, but from what she's saying is that you cannot see, typically for an addition, you shouldn't be able to see, the sides of it looking at
The front of the house.
Yes, so
Right.
that's what she's saying. I don't mind moving it back, but that's the.
On the reason it's one story on the right side is because there is a one-story sunroom that part of the addition will be behind. So if you were to put a two-story mass behind that one-story addition, it would be highly visible from the principal facade. And we've never allowed that before.
do you have the drawing of all the facades up there? Or the?
Which drawing were you asking for, Commissioner? The one, the side view?
The one-story addition is adjacent to the sunroom,
Yes,
but it's not, is it higher than the sunroom
no.
in the current plan?
This is the rear view, so you can see this, where the sloped roof is generally where the sunroom is. I can do the site plan, if you can see that. This on the right, it's a one-story addition.
The sunroom is part of the main block there, that it's not differentiated?
It's not, which is why I had the drawing on the side that kind of shows that little mass that pops out on the side.
Okay,
tip
on
of
this
it.
slide, there's a lighter green rectangle on the side. Is that the sunroom?
Yes.
So that's not shown on the drawing on the left.
It's not differentiated, no. They have them. Yeah, they do.
Let me make a comment on this.
Yes.
Okay, two things. I'm looking at the site plan showing the house on the corner and all that land is situated on in Four Corners. It looks like you got enough room to build another house there. And I want to make sure we're not getting that. I don't know the zoning of that area. I don't know what the lot has to be, how wide to meet that. And number two, as he said, and we said this before, this is diagrammatic drawings. And the neighbors, I'm sure, are very concerned about, hey, we didn't involved with that. The details are very lacking. The foundation, we have what you call the foundation details. You look at the front door, it doesn't even match. The front door has a arc. And if you look at the drawing, it's straight across. We want to have the developer tell us exactly what we're getting.
And we do understand that, and staff tried to address that with details of, information about details in the recommendations.
Yes.
In terms of our applications, we work with all kinds of different skill levels and, architects, draftsmen, all kinds of different folks.
Right.
And so we do not have some sort of requirement to show absolutely everything on a certain plan. So staff understands the need for that knowledge and that information, and that needs to be confirmed. And so with these plans that were submitted, there's no detail, as you said, on the front of the house, but there's no detail on the back either. They're approaching everything the same way. We know the detail is on the front of the house, and staff confirmed in the write-up that it's going to be replicated on the addition. So those details, we feel very comfortable will be replicated as staff. And we don't have the ability to necessarily get every detail on the plans that are submitted.
Well, in order to get a building permit, you got to have details.
Right, when folks come to that level of submittals and detail and start to really get those plans submitted and drawn up by professionals, then those will be done.
Okay,
Can I get clarification on a point from staff, please? So there's reference to the principal facade, which is the explanation why the addition behind the sunroom can only be one story. So if that's what we're considering for, guideline 5.3, dealing with the size and scale of the addition, why are we considering the Watery Avenue perspective? I'm sorry, am I clarifying, or am I being clear in my question? So why can't the addition behind the sunroom be 2 stories if all we're considering is from the principal facade? Or if what we're considering is the principal facade when we're considering the Watery Avenue facade, or I guess the side facade for the addition?
You have to consider all visible sides.
Okay.
The front of the house is the principal facade. That is the definition of it. So based on the guidelines, when you're looking at the principal facade, you should not be distracted by the addition. It's impossible to hide an addition on a corner lot. We come across as a lot. It's hard to do. And so, we have to consider what it's going to look like from all sides. You know, you're going to see part of the right side because the lot has a bunch of space. So, you know, I've considered that as well in my recommendations, which is part of the one-story addition, because you'll be able to see a lot of that up the side of the house. So, I mean, everything has to be considered on a corner lot because it is highly visible.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions or of the applicant?
Sorry. One other suggestion, if you're willing to bring it back from Wateree, would it be possible to do that by making the two-story addition narrower, taking it further into where you have this driveway to your parking lot now?
I mean,
Squeeze it a little bit so you can bring it away from the street. Squish it out a little bit. Instead of, whatever, I can't read the dimensions on that. Make it a narrower?
I mean, how much squeeze are you talking about?
Well, I'm not the designer, so.
No, but I'm saying, I mean, are you talking 2-3 foot? Are you talking 5 foot? Are you talking, you know, I mean, if you say squeeze it, how much?
I'm just asking if it's possible, if you're willing to consider it as.
Definitely possible, but
Yeah.
it depends on how, you know, how far you want me to narrow it. I mean, before I made the drawings, and I've been communicating with Miss Rachel, and she's been very helpful. I told her I walked through the neighborhood, and I drove through the neighborhood, and I mean, on Wateree Avenue, there are some houses which will have, I mean, what do you call, landscape. I mean, you can't even see the houses, and it's right on the, you know, not even 4 feet away from the sidewalk. I mean, you have vegetation, or what do you call, plants or whatever. You can't even see the house. So I don't see how different this will be if, you know, some people have houses where it's right off the vegetation is right off the sidewalk, and you can't even see the house. I mean, I don't think that's
Well,
intrusive.
I think we got a lot of comments on this from the public, and I think maybe some of those comments could be addressed by pushing it back and having nice landscaping that's more compatible with all the plants and trees on the street there now. Possibly, I don't know.
But what would be the difference if I replicate someone's, say, on the same street where there are trees right off where, for example, where the building would be, it will be the same thing.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Well, I mean, eventually, when we talk about this, after we do all the comments, I mean, we got to go back to any specific, you know, points. But I mean, you had some good ones earlier, too, so I think we're just going to have to figure out how to address this as we go through here. But let me ask you, at this point, do we have any questions of him, just, any more about what he has submitted? And we may bring you back up after a public comment, too. Do you think you want to do that? Should we move to public comment? Because you're right, we do have a lot of people who want to speak. Do we want to hear them? Okay, yeah, no, that's good. Let's, all right, thank you, sir.
Also, Chloe, just
Yes.
to acknowledge that we did send several letters, I don't have them in front of me, prior to the meeting that were submitted for DDRC's review.
Yes, the ones, all the commissioners should have received that. So let me clarify, because I know I haven't had a chance to bring the commissioners up to speed here. I think we have a situation where maybe one individual is going to speak on behalf of several. I just want to make sure we got everybody here. So Paul Tripp and Bill Adams and Lynn Lindler. Okay, great. Because not all of you, I think, were signed in on the sheet. Did you? Okay, thank you. I'm just making sure we have everybody accounted for. Bill Adams, did you sign in? Did you sign in on the sheet too? You did? Am I blind here? All right, just want to.
There's also the sign-in sheet at the podium if they didn't get a chance to sign in.
Oh, okay. I'm just making sure I've got everybody accounted for.
Ms. Jacob, I'm Jim Daniel. Let me clarify something. Those three names you just mentioned, agreed to give me their 2 minutes.
Right, understand.
Not planning on speaking, but
Yes.
they are here.
That's what I'm in the process of explaining. So yes, thank you. I mean, that's exactly where I was going. So I'm just, because this is unique. I don't know if we've ever had that situation. And so it looks like,
On that list,
excuse me?
John Baynes, B-A-Y-N-E-S.
So I do have, oh, I'm sorry, sir. Did you sign in as well?
Yeah, I did.
Did you sign in for Jim to speak on your behalf or just in general? Okay, because it looks to me, and I'm just trying to clarify, I do see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, 7, 8 other additional people who want to speak. Does that seem right? Okay. Well, I mean, we want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to speak. So I'll go through the list, and if your name hasn't been called, I will make sure to ask, okay? Okay. Okay. No, that's, we'll figure it out. So what I understand, Jim, is you have your time plus 3 other individuals. Okay, so that'll give you 8 minutes. Okay. And all right. That's what I wanted to clarify. All right, so Jim, would you like to go first? No. Who has an order? Who would like to go first? I have those 3 here. Yeah, okay. Hi, please speak your name.
Hello, my name's Tommy Johnson.
And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
I do.
All right, thank you.
So in reference to our previous comments to the board last month, we wanted to reiterate our concerns regarding the proposed addition. The primary reservation expressed by the neighbors is related to the size and scale of the new addition. I think the board has recognized that today. It's the general sentiment among the community that any addition should be complementary to the original structure, not rather than overwhelming it. And there's direct support for this in the Wales Garden Historic Overlay, specifically Section 5, additions, states limiting the size and scale of an addition so that it is clearly subordinate to the original structure. Despite submitting a new design with a hyphen feature, this proposal does not adhere to those guidelines. We understand that the guidelines are not legal requirements, but rather concepts for making informed judgments on a case-by-case basis. We firmly believe in this particular case, justifying an addition larger than the original structure would be inappropriate. Mr. Daniels going to present some data today showing that such an addition has not been customary in Wales Gardens' past applications of the guidelines. We strongly believe endorsing this proposal would set a detrimental precedent for future renovations. I think the property that was referenced by staff at the corner of Seneca and Watery was an addition that occurred prior to the suspicion is that addition would not have carried in today's environment. I've been a resident of downtown neighborhoods for almost 30 years. These neighborhoods are very special. There are multi-generational experiences in many of these homes. My people in the audience today that are residing in homes that belong to their fathers, mothers, and grandmothers and grandfathers. That's the case for me as well. So I would ask the staff to very carefully consider the character of these neighborhoods. And again, we understand their guidelines. They're not legal requirements, but the examples cited by staff really aren't apples to apples comparisons. One's a commercial property. I don't know how that's relevant. But I'll allow Mr. Daniel to take the floor and give you some specific examples of other additions in Wales Garden. Thank you.
May I ask a question of the speaker? Is that appropriate, Madam Chair?
Staff, is that appropriate? Can we ask questions to the public, comments?
So the opposition is to the size and scale as it relates to the original structure, not in general. So, well, because you referenced the character of the neighborhood, and it does have many homes that are 5,000, 6,000 square feet. So it's not necessarily the overall size in the aggregate, it's as it relates to the original structure.
Well, I mean, staff has indicated that the addition should be subordinate to the original structure as well.
I guess what I'm getting at is could could the applicant develop a similarly sized structure if it were placed differently on the lot?
Potentially, I can tell you my personal experience with the DDRC. I'm a resident of Emery Avenue. I applied for a proposal for a side addition that was adjacent to the primary facade. And I think the length of that proposal was somewhere in the neighborhood of 27 feet. And I used an architect here in town that is familiar with the guidelines, and that proposal was rejected and denied.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, yeah,
Madam Chairman, I'm Jim Daniel, and I have a small interest in a piece of property in Wells Garden.
do you swear to tell the truth during this
Oh, I'm sorry,
proceeding?
yeah, sure.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Broom, you asked a question. That lot is 102 feet wide and 126 feet deep. I owned a similar lot on Watery Avenue. That lot would be wide enough or deep enough to have a lot on Watery, but not wide enough to have a lot on Emery. A couple of things before I get into the details. Y'all should have a set of pictures I delivered to staff on Tuesday. The first picture shows the rear of this house. On the top left side, there is a missing window. Don't know where it's gone. There should be 7 pictures there. But the one on the top is the back of this house. That top window is missing in my position there was be until the window is replaced, it doesn't qualify for the Bailey bill. Second item, the watery side of this house from the front door to the rear of the addition is 67 feet long. There is no door on the watery side of that property. There is a door on the rear of the other side, but who knows what is built in between the watery side and the rear. My concern is this is a safety issue for fire. There should be an ingress and egress somewhere where the 2 buildings meet. That may not be your purview, but it seems to me that's an important thing that needs to be there. Now, getting into the actual comments, the original footprint, and I'm using footprint, not square feet like she was using when you just talk about the whole structure. The original footprint now is 1,253 square feet. The proposed addition is 1,604 square feet. That's 128% more square footage that's in the original house. What I have given you, there are 6 additions in Wells Garden that front on the street, but also have side access. Let's go through each of these. The first one is a house at the corner of Pickens and Haywood Street. The addition is the far left piece. That's an awfully large house, but the addition is a 2-story garage with a living space above it. That is 33% of the original structure. The next picture is an addition at 151 Saluda. The big space there was a garage. It has been converted into a pool room now for the new pool behind it. The addition is that small sliver in between the two. The addition represents about 15% of the original square footage. The next property is a property at 211 Saluda. The addition there is the middle piece. That's the kitchen. The garage on the right is original. The addition on the left is original. That addition is 772 square feet, which is 52% of the original footprint of that house. The next picture is 1803 Catawba. That's the addition is on the left. and there's a sun porch, a screen porch on the other side of that. That addition is 1,000 square feet, which is 69% of the original footprint. 211 Watery is an L shape on the back. There's this addition, which is, that's not right. Yeah, the total, there's that, plus there's an open garage. When you add those two together, it's 1,300 square feet. But if you take out the screen porch and the other, then it's roughly 62% of the original footprint. The last one is 1802 Seneca. That's a three-bay garage with apartments. That property addition is, and I think you referenced 1802 in your comments, because 1803 is a two-story house across the street. This last property, the addition is 1,000 square feet. That's 64% of the original home. When you take all these in combination, they range from 15% to 64% of the original footprint, compared to 128% for the addition the applicant has proposed. Based on that, we believe it's out of scale. We believe the massing's wrong. We believe it's not in accordance with the guidelines and should be substantially smaller to meet the criteria. Y'all also mentioned a house in Cottontown. I looked at that yesterday. That property, that is a big addition, but it's a difference. On the right side of that house is a graveyard. There's not a street. So it's not bothering anybody like you would on the Watery side of this house. So in conclusion, I think this house is much larger than it should be. It's out of scale with the neighborhood as far as an addition based on the other 6 we've seen. It's a monolithic form. It's basically a square box. And I think this should be denied. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Is that, the applicant wants to speak? Yeah, come on up.
Just wondering, do I need to address each, or I have to
You
wait
don't,
for everything?
if you would like, you could wait till you hear all public comment and then address it all at one time.
But I can address now.
You can.
This is my first time, and I don't know if it's normal or unusual for about 10 people to, oppose a simple thing like this. I don't mean to bring my grievances here, but ever since I purchased the house, it's just harassment day and night. I get calls. I'm back home, I get calls, there's something wrong with the house, but I'm not gonna bring my grievances here. But all I wanna say is that I'm here to do exactly what the city of South Carolina allows me to do. Everything I've done is with Miss Rachel here. The guidelines, the size of it. If she tells me I can only build 1,000 square foot, that's what I'm gonna build. But she said I have to build, it has to be no more than what the size of the house is. So the house is about 2,600 square foot, so that's why it's around 2,500. But if she tells me I have to build 2,000, that's what I'll build. But I'm not gonna build what the neighbors say. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, I'm not gonna build, because everybody here has built their house according to what, how they want it. So if the city of South Carolina or the board says, hey, do this, that's what I'm gonna do. But what I'm not gonna do is say, hey, the neighbor says build 1,000 square foot, so that's what he's gonna build. So the design, everything, the scale, everything is according to what I'm gonna be allowed to build per Ms. Rachel or the preservation or the city of South Carolina or the DCCR. So I just wanna make that clear. So.
No, and I appreciate that, because as you can tell, that isn't our purview to at least give comment if we think it's an appropriate scale or not, and that is part of
Which is
what
fine,
you're-
but I just want to make it clear that I'm not going to build what the neighbors want me to build. I'm going to build what you guys allow and what the preservation and the city of South Carolina. If the city of South Carolina says I can add 2,500 square foot or 8,000 and I can do it, that's what I'm gonna do, not what the neighbors say.
Understood.
So, yeah, it's been hell since I purchased it, but I'm willing to go through this. So whatever is gonna be decided here, this is what I'm gonna do, so.
All right, well, thank you for that. All right, I'm going to go through the list I have, and then once I'm done, like I said, any others here will speak. Manning Smith, please come on up. And state your name,
Manning Smith,
and do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
absolutely I do.
Thank you, and make sure the microphone is, kind of as close to you as you can.
Better? Can you hear me? I wanted to get away from size and whether or not it's actually in compliance with the Bailey Bill requirements and your requirements. And I wanted to bring up the history of this thing. What we are dealing with here today is a child of the National Historic Preservation Act. That's where the Bailey Bill and all of its other progeny came from. And the National Historic Preservation Act speaks to rehabilitating, repairing, et cetera, historical buildings or buildings that have been protected through an overlay plan like we have here. We are talking about a building that is twice the size of the original building. That is not a rehab or a renovation. That's a new addition, however you want to look at it. And as we all know, the Bailey Bill is going to provide a tax break of a tax abatement of 20% for whatever the percentage is for the next 20 years. And I just want to make the point that I don't want to be in the position as a taxpayer, and I don't think anyone else in this room wants to be in that position, of paying for somebody's addition. I find it inimical to the whole scheme that we started all this under. That is to fix what's there, make it look bigger, not double it, and make it a bigger building. And one other thing that nobody said, but it's important to me, the canopy, the tree canopy in that area is sometimes in excess of 100 years old. And, I walk through that neighborhood and I find trees that I've never seen before. And the only way I can look at them is with a clear view. As soon as you infringe on that view, as far as I'm concerned, you infringe on the enjoyment of a spectacular tree canopy. It really is. That's all I got. Thank you.
Well, thank you. All right. Christine? Okay, and I apologize, because I wasn't clear what the last name was here. Is it Sharon? Sarah Sharon? Looks like Sharon Hollyman, maybe. That's not ringing a bell? Okay, just trying to, okay. We've already, let's see. And Paula Gordon. Paula Gordon? Yes.
Hi, I'm Paula Gordon.
And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
I do.
Thank you.
I do. And last time I was here, I explained to y'all that I'm a historian. And so I'm concerned with historic preservation. And I know that's the goal of this commission. I know that's the goal of Rachel and everyone here. Our neighborhood homes, including 1803 Enery, were built at the turn of the century. The home's features reflect that time period, and that gives our neighborhood a cohesiveness and charm. Furthermore, the appeal of the facade of each home is complemented by the proportions of each composite piece. For example, during the 1900s, the homes were designed more modestly than in the previous Victorian age. This proposal, as we've said, is a very large addition. And I noticed when we put it up on the screen, the roof line of the addition was not even the same as the roof line of the original home, the historic home. And the historic home itself would set a precedent in our neighborhood, as Mr. Daniels explained, with size. And his guidelines for Wales Garden said that the addition should not detract or obstruct any architectural features, and especially not the principal facade, and that this limited size and scale of the addition should be subordinate to the original structure. And I don't think that's what we're getting. I think that one of the reasons that we're upset, Mr. Peters, is that it is setting a precedent in our neighborhood. And we like our history, and we're welcoming you to the neighborhood. But, you know, we want to work with you, but you have to want to work with us too. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. John, would you like to speak? Okay, sorry, come on.
I want to reiterate that the house is not twice the size of the original house. I've been working with Miss Rachel. The house is 2,600 square foot. I can build 2,600 square foot. It cannot be over. So the house is not double the size of the original house. The structure may look different, but it's not the size, and it has to be in line with it. That's number one. Number two is that I know you talked about paying taxes and stuff. Because I'm out of state, my property tax is 3 times what you pay because I'm out of state. So there you go. Number three, you talk about some trees in the area. I have trees. I have a tree that is very, very close to the house that insurance wants me to cut because, you know, branches go over and it damages the roof. So as much as I may want to keep some trees or whatever it is, insurance wants me to cut it.
Sir, I appreciate that. I wasn't suggesting that you can cut.
All right, we have to keep some sense of order here. I know, sorry. Go ahead and finish speaking.
So I just want to make that clear. Another thing I want to make clear, I get text messages from some of you guys. I don't know who you guys are, but it's not going to be a hostel or Airbnb. So I think I've made that clear a billion times to a few people. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, John Baines.
My name is John Baines.
And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
I do.
Thank you.
I want to first take exception to the registering this as under the Bailey Bill. The Bailey Bill is for rehabilitation of historic structures. This house, to my knowledge, is not on the National Register. It is not noted as a historic home and building in Richland County. It is not on the Columbia City Landmark List. It is not a designated historic structure by the Richland County Conservation Committee, and wasn't on the historic Columbia tour of the Wales Garden neighborhood earlier this year. It's a sort of a standard-looking small home, single-family occupancy. The reason I'm before you is because I think what's happening here, one of the reasons you expand the property is to make it into rental units. And Enery and Watery are facing an invasion of students from the university, which is consistently entering more students, building fewer rooms and parking places, and the students invade the neighborhood. There are 2 times when that's a problem. Renters are not bad, but students can be a problem, especially if the landlord is absentee and doesn't live in Columbia or doesn't live in South Carolina. And the second thing about students is they don't really learn how to use rakes and lawnmowers and pruning shears and edgers and things like that. And we have a similar property on Saluda. The worst-looking property on Saluda above Wheat Street, all below Wheat is rental property, but above Wheat Street, at Wheat, above Wheat Street on Saluda, the landlord lives most of the time out of the country. He cleans his yard and mows his grass when he is cited by the code enforcement officer. And he does that consistently. And then between citations, it grows, it's unmanaged, it's poorly behaved. We care about our neighborhood. This year, we invested over $10,000 in pruning the azalea trees all the way down to 5 Points. And we're planning, with the city's help, to plant another 180 azaleas to replace the ones that have died. We care about the neighborhood. This is rental property coming up, and I think that's a very serious consideration from the development side, not the design side, the development side from my point of view of the DDRC. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, I just want to clarify when they comment about it not being an historic structure.
Yes,
So
it is
please,
absolutely a historic structure as part of the Wales Garden neighborhood. It's locally designated.
I see it's the 1920s. I assumed it was on the list. Okay, all right, just want to clarify that. Last name McKenzie? Okay. Anderson? Does anybody here want to speak that hasn't spoken yet? No? Okay, well, Kathy?
Thank you, and good evening. My name is Kathy Love. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's great. And do you swear to tell the truth?
I
during this
swear to
proceeding?
tell the truth.
Thank you.
I live around the corner, and I'm sorry we haven't had a chance to meet yet. Hopefully, if this gets resolved, we'll have a Welcome to the Neighborhood event, because we really would like to encourage homeowners who are residents in the neighborhood. And that would be a lovely goal. And I'm still not clear whether this is going to be a rental or not. So I'm sure the fervor that you're feeling is unusual and feels odd. But it is because this is a community that genuinely cares about our neighborhood, and we're actively involved in preserving it. And we welcome neighbors who want to feel and do exactly those things. So if you could tell me that you were coming to live in the house, we'd be having a welcome party. It being a rental and having scope creep with rental and students is a concern. I know that's a little beyond your purview, so I'll defer to comments already made about line of sight and scope and scale. And I thank you for what you all do. I know you have to weigh and balance a lot of things. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on this case? Yeah, well, please come on up.
Good evening, staff and commissioners. My name is Elizabeth Smith, and I swear to tell the truth. I was born in Charleston, but I grew up in Florence, South Carolina for part of high school. I don't know of another municipality that has destroyed more of the minuscule historic structures than Florence. I mean, Manning and I call it asphalt town. And that is what can happen if new wonderful neighbors from Maryland come in and work with this committee. We get a beautiful result, not just functionality, but beauty. And that's glorious. I've seen what happens when the quality of beauty is ignored by statistics and percentages. And the bottom line is, well, I think, for this commission is to ensure architectural integrity, which is another word for architectural, or another way of saying architectural beauty. I mean, let's face it, the stuff that was available 120 years ago, you can't buy it for love or money. And anyway, I just want to welcome our Marylander to South Carolina, and I hope we can come up with something that is aesthetically in comportment with our neighborhood, which includes a really little teeny modest house like Mr. Smith and I have, in addition to those grand facades that remind me of Newport, Rhode Island, that are on certain streets. But all of those structures have a place. But I can't turn my zoned residential single-family number 3, which is the tiniest ones, into a number 1 because I want to. It's not, I'm getting beyond my scope right now, so I will stop. But I encourage the commissioners and the staff to work for aesthetically pleasing and functional buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and any other public comment? So I just want to clarify for the commissioners and staff, make sure I'm correct on this. There's actually 2 items here when we discuss this. There's one is the Bailey bill, and then the addition. I mean, it's 2 separate topics, 2 separate motions. So with that, I'm going to open it up if any commissioner has any questions or clarifications or wants to discuss anything.
To further clarify on that, the application for the Bailey bill is only going to be in regards, will only apply to certain renovations done to the existing structure, is that correct?
Yes.
So under the Bailey bill, that little shed addition on the back, that part of the historic part, could that be removed or must that be retained?
Yes, I mentioned in my evaluation that part of the house was originally a porch, but as it is now, it has lost all integrity. So yes, it may be removed. It's also common to remove features off the back of a house when adding an addition.
So let's discuss with the Bailey bill first. Does anybody have any other comments or questions or clarifications on that? Over here. I mean, I think we're going to break it into 2 motions. Okay. So I'm going to open it up for a motion on the Bailey bill, and then we can discuss the next.
Did you say you're open to a motion just for the bill now?
Yeah, we're going to just talk about the Bailey bill first,
First.
and then we're going to separate it,
Okay.
yeah. So,
Are we open to motions now?
and unless anybody's got any other comments or questions, you want to talk to anybody about the Bailey bill? That's what I was asking. Do you any others?
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
It might be helpful to address the addition first.
Oh, look, there you go. All right.
This is a question for staff. Because this comes up a lot every time we consider the size and scale and whether it's clearly subordinate to the original structure. Can you just explain to us y'all's understanding of what subordinate means in this context?
So what was the definition? Subordinate technically means of lesser importance. So the additions typically will read as sometimes mass smaller, sometimes the detailing is a little less intricate. With this too, you want it to read original house addition. That's always something you want to see. In this case, the roof shape is a little bit different. It's lower. Often we ask for roofs to be lower on the additions than they are in the main house, so that's pretty common. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would add that typically, the way it has been interpreted over the years as subordinate, the hyphen is a big part of that in terms of separating the original house from the addition.
I would think that would refer to massing, but size, you see where I'm?
Yeah, I do understand exactly what you're saying, but it helps to, in terms of regarding it as a,
Secondary.
thank you, a secondary piece of the structure. It separates it out from the main structure in that way. And that has been the way additions, larger additions have been handled. many times here, as well as Rachel mentioned, through also additions that have been reviewed for tax credits. So I just wanted to, I think what we're trying to do is give you the rationale for the decision-making that staff made based on past precedents and understanding of how these things work. So.
Sure. So I guess based on that interpretation, you could have an addition that is, well, just for purposes of the example, 2 times the size of the original structure, depending on how it's designed, could clearly be subordinate to the original.
I mean, I think that would be hard to achieve, but we've never really put like a square footage size on it because it depends a lot on the lot, depends a lot on the original building. I guess you could do that if it wasn't super visible from every angle. So it's hard to put like a size limit on an addition, saying it can't be more than twice as or 3 times as big. It depends on the context a lot. So every case is a little bit different.
Thank you.
Any other comments, commissioners? If not, I can open it up for a motion, if someone has a motion they want to make.
I'm going to make a motion to deny the request for preliminary certification of the Bailey Bill and for a certificate of design approval for an addition in not complying, pardon me, with Section 5 of the Wales Garden Architectural Conservation District guidelines or the pertinent sections from the city ordinance referring to the Bailey Bill or regarding the Bailey Bill, particularly that the size and scale is not clearly subordinate to the original structure, and while there may be a hyphen as referenced in staff comments, that speaks more to the massing than the size and scale as it relates to the original structure.
I'll second.
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg? Ms. Jaco?
I'm trying to clarify, the motion covered everything?
Yes.
Did.
Okay. No.
Mr. Ledecker?
Yes.
And Mr. Sleepy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next case.
Thank you.
All right, the next case is 2320 Marion Street, which is a request for a certificate of design approval for an accessory structure in the Cottontown Bellevue Architectural Conservation District. This is a one-story brick veneer single-family house, which is roughly 1,400 square feet, with an additional 380 square feet front wraparound porch. The house sits on the corner of Marion and Victoria Streets, making it a highly visible property. The applicant is requesting to construct an accessory building at the rear of the property. The design includes a garage on the first floor with garage doors facing Victoria Street and an apartment space above. Sorry. Staff has been working with the applicant from the beginning of the process to provide guidance on visually minimizing the overall size of the accessory dwelling unit from the street. However, staff still has concerns with the overall scale of the accessory building and its proximity to the street. As seen in the streetscape drawing submitted by the applicant, the mass and scale of the proposed accessory building is similar to that of the adjacent duplex, which makes the overall structure, the accessory structure, read more like a primary building rather than an accessory building. I think I have that. Oh my God. Sorry. And there's the streetscape. In section 3, new construction, criteria 9, outbuildings states construct garage and storage buildings so that they reflect the character of the existing house and are compatible in terms of height, scale, and roof shape. Place such buildings away from the primary facade of the building and do not allow outbuildings to obscure character-defining features of a building. Many details of the proposed accessory structure are compatible with existing house, including the use of lap siding, which is a common siding material for outbuildings, and the use of 4/1 windows to match those of the house. However, the overall scale of the proposed structure is very large for its associated lot and placement in proximity to the street. The accessory building is proposed to be a total of 1,739 square feet with an 896 square foot footprint. Sorry, which is more, the total square footage is larger than the house itself and slightly larger than the two-story, three-car garage, which is across the street, which is on a lot that's almost twice the size of this lot. You can see here, the square is roughly, it's not quite to scale, where the outbuilding would be across the street where you says 1401 is a three-car garage that's on a bigger lot. Because of its overall large size and scale, the accessory building is placed closer to the street than the adjacent duplexes and much closer to the street than the garage across the street. This placement disrupts the street pattern and detracts from the character of the adjacent historic buildings. There are a number of large two-story garage buildings nearby that are associated with one-story brick houses or duplexes. However, like the three-car garage across the street, these larger accessory buildings are usually well hidden behind the main structure and are on large enough lots so that they are set back from the street. And this is just, I think that's, yeah. This just shows roughly where the setback of the duplexes next door are. The dotted line is where the front of the porches are, and the solid line is where the actual front of the house is, compared to the accessory building proposed. Staff finds that the overall scale of the proposed accessory buildings is incompatible with its associated structure and lot and detracts from the established patterns along the street and recommends denial of the request. I'll just pop through the slides real quick. This is roughly where the outbuilding would be placed, near that tree there. And this is looking from the duplex back towards the 2320 Marion Street. You can see where the tree is roughly where the addition would be. And again, this is looking from 2320 Marion to the duplex next door. So if you, I don't know if you can imagine, but where the fence line is, behind the tree is kind of where the front wall of the addition would be.
Rachel, the property line, did that include where those trash cans were piled up, or is that a different property?
You can ask the applicant. I think,
Yeah, I mean.
the fence there is not where the property line is. It's over.
It's brick wall. Oh,
On the
it
left.
goes over to that brick wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you get through it?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Any other questions of staff before we have the applicant speak, or, yeah, anybody? Yeah, applicant, please come on up. State your name.
Hello, Kelly Gallagher, and I swear to tell the truth.
Make sure you got the microphone kind of with you. I don't think we could hear you very well.
Hello, good. Kelly Gallagher, swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I got back in town last night about midnight, so I wish I had some print-offs to give you, but I'll walk you through what I've got. The main things, so the point of the design guidelines in my mind is to preserve the historic integrity of the district. And while the details are important, I believe the main reasons for such guidelines is so that people don't plop wholly incompatible designs in there. For example, some sort of piece of Soviet brutalism or a generic Mungo cookie cutter home. I do think the design of my ADU is wholly consistent with these, and it would fit fairly nicely and complement the historic district of Cottontown. So I'd like to address some of the specific worries. So thank you. First off, I'd like to thank Rachel and her team, who, as she mentioned, we had a lot of communication throughout this, and so it was very helpful getting everything put together. And she even got me hooked up with the, the zoning committee to help get the lot approved, a variance approved for increased lot coverage as well. So the main things that Rachel mentioned and the letter, or what she just read now regarding Section 3, new construction, 0.9 outbuildings, I think incidentally, minus one of them, most of mine absolutely, I think, follows those. So one, construct the garage and storage buildings so that they reflect the character of the existing house. I think she mentioned that this went pretty well to that. Are compatible in terms of height, check, and then scale. So I think the scale is really the issue that we're concerned with here. And then finally, 3, that such buildings are away from the primary facade, and so that's good as well. And that the outbuildings do not obscure the character-defining features of the building. And I would take that to be in reference to the primary dwelling. So not specifically regarding perhaps the neighboring houses, but I'll address that as well. So the worry was that one of the worries is that the overall square footage of the ADU would be larger than the house itself. If you're counting the livable and non-livable square footage of the ADU, so including the square footage of what the garage space would be, then yes, that's correct. But if you're allowed to count the non-livable space in the garage, then presumably I should be able to count the non-livable attic space, which is extensively large in the house. And long-term, the plan is to ultimately put a dormer in there to actually be able to acquire some of that space. So would potentially up to double the lot. So I'd end up having something like a 2,500 square foot home, not including the covered front porch. Maybe that's relevant, maybe it's not. But if we're only concerned with the footprint, which is I think the more relevant thing, then we're looking at a difference between 896 square foot footprint for the ADU and an 1,853 square foot footprint of the primary unit. 2.2, would it be large on the lot? Yes, I grant that. This is, however, why I applied for a variance from zoning to be able to move from 40% coverage to up to 50% coverage. And in that application, I submitted everything in there except for this streetscape. I didn't have that ready yet. I have the letter right here of that, but they responded back after seeing the review plans, et cetera. Quote, the applicant's request for a variance to increase the lot coverage standard to permit an ADU with a 2-car garage as described above is hereby approved, end quote. So if the worry that it's too large for the lot, then the zoning variance in my mind addresses this. So primarily what's relevant should be the design itself. And I think that's generally been spoken to, that the design fits well. I wish it was a larger and deeper lot. That would be very helpful and make all this easier, but it's the lot that it is. So with respect to does it fit with the streetscape? I believe it does. The worry was that it would not line up with the duplexes to east of it, specifically that it would be in front of them, so it would be sitting a little bit in front of them. So if you look at those immediately next to it, then fair enough, but that doesn't look at it in the context of the rest of the street, namely Victoria. So if you continue down Victoria towards Bull Street, you'll actually see that the next block, those are actually pretty much right on the sidewalk. And I'm on the corner lot of Marion and Victoria, so my covered front porch is at its closest point about 3 feet from the sidewalk, which is comparable where the ADU would be, 3 feet from the sidewalk. Immediately next to that on Victoria, the next 3 duplexes are a little bit further back, but if you go to the next block on Victoria, they're right back up to about 3 feet, 5 feet. So in the context of the whole street, minus just the narrow block, I think it actually fits well with that. Um, Furthermore, I believe the design guidelines are to preserve the historic district as a whole and not just one small part of a street. And as Rachel mentioned, the district has a large number of large garage apartments and ADUs throughout. Yes, the one right across the street is recessed, and like I said, I wish my lot was larger, but it doesn't. But there is a precedent for something like this. I wish I could have had it printed off, but at 1300 Somerville Avenue, which is the southeast corner of Somerville and Sumter, there is a 2-story, 3-car garage with apartment above it that's built right along the sidewalk, and this is a corner house just like mine. I have a photo, if you care, I can walk my laptop up to show you just in a bit. And immediately next to that on the street, so not the main street of the primary dwelling unit, but the street that the garage lines up with on the ADU is Sumter. And so 2 stories, and it absolutely dwarfs the single dwelling house right next to it, which itself is also recessed from the street. So it is a pretty comparable situation. Large ADU next to duplexes, it's further in front next to the one next to it. So I'd be happy to show that. So I think my ADU would be just another example of this type of already existing architectural style in the district. So this would actually complement and fit with the district as opposed to just the one little street. Finally, the final thing that I would say to assuage any worries about it not fitting with the streetscape is that, and perhaps I should have included this in the original design, but again, first time doing all this, I'd always intended to put a fence along the sidewalk from my house, from the edge of the wraparound front porch, along the sidewalk to the ADU. This would help make it obvious that the ADU is part of my lot and not just additional housing unit on the street, and thus out of line with the adjacent duplexes. This also highlights its subservience to the main structure, and it doesn't get lost in the facade line of the adjacent duplexes. Furthermore, the use of the fence would be in line with the house ADU combo mentioned at the corner of Somerville and Sumter, because they do a similar design thing, basically. Their main house is like this. They extend the fence out to the sidewalk, run it all the way along the sidewalk so that it butts up perfectly to the ADU structure so that it makes it nice and neat, I suppose. So to conclude, I would like to thank you for your time and consideration. I can appreciate that this is a large ADU for the lot, but I hope I've made it clear to my mind that the design substantially complies with the design guidelines. I do understand the recommendation to make a smaller structure, and I would grant that it would make this easier, but the apartment as designed is only 843 square feet. To make it any smaller in a significant way that would really address and assuage the largeness worries, it would basically have to go down to a studio apartment of sorts. And one of the reasons for wanting a 2-bedroom apartment is the flexibility it would allow. Currently, I'm planning on just renting it out, but long-term, I'd like the ability to, like long-term guests, especially welcoming the parents in to help with new children and potentially even moving them in old age, and a studio really just wouldn't be fitting for that. So I'd be happy to address any questions you might have, and I'm also happy to bring this around to show some photos of the...
I had a question for staff. The one you mentioned, the large ADU somewhere around the corner, is that in the same district, or do you know, Rachel?
The address he described is, but I'm not sure.
Was curious.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, and I'm not sure when that was built. It's actually on its own lot. It's kind of, there are a couple buildings like that in the neighborhood that are on their own lot, and originally maybe were garage buildings for a house, but yeah, it is in the district.
Had its own, yeah, okay. I just was curious.
This is the ADU, and then this, the primary housing is up there.
It's separated, okay.
Yes, this is the house. This is the accessory dwelling unit. Oh. And that's the main house is further up.
That building?
Yes, sir.
In Compton.
Yes, sir. This is the southeast corner of
What's the veneer?
This is Britain. This is right on the sidewalk. This is a little. This is close to the sidewalk. This was the house right here. This was.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant?
Yes, what you're showing is cementitious siding to be painted, correct?
I'm sorry, say it again, please.
You're showing the veneer as cementitious siding, not brick.
No, it would be hardy plank, yeah.
And what you just showed me there, that's brick.
This was brick, yeah.
Is that one of the reasons, Rachel, is that one of the reasons it's not brick, that guidelines?
No, it's common for outbuildings to have lap siding. Yeah, this is more of an issue of the scale and how it fits on the lot.
Rachel, there was some discussion about accessory building reading as clearly being an accessory. And what was the exact, you wanted to differentiate itself as being an accessory?
I think what you're referring to is what I was talking about, the size between the primary building and the accessory building?
The size, I think you said the appearance or should be as an accessory building, not as another primary residence.
I mean, I think it's detailed like an accessory building. I think what I was talking about was the overall size of it compared to the duplexes. The massing of it is similar to those.
I wish they made the duplexes bigger, but that's not my lot. It is, or at least, to be clear, at least the current designs with it, it does follow all guidelines for ADUs. It's less than 50% of the square footage of the house, and its height is lower, et cetera, et cetera.
Your side and rear property lines, are you as close to them as you can possibly be, or is there a possibility to move
It's
away
moved
from
back
this?
as far as it's able, according to code. If it was on older code, then I could have put it 3 more feet back, but with the newer international building code, it has to be 5 feet, yeah.
5 is, yeah.
So it's as far back as it can be.
Kelly, can you remind me, what is the square footage of your house with the porches? I don't know if I have that.
$1853.
How much?
1853?
$1853.
Is that right? Staff has valid points. I'm not sure actually what to say. I mean, I understand the points they've raised.
Staff does make valid points in the recommendations. I'm just having a little trouble. The applicant alluded to this or referred to it directly. For example, the staff recommendations refer to size and scale of the streetscape and its proximity to the street, which detracts from the established pattern of historic houses along Victoria Street. I guess I'm wondering where in the guidelines that's for us to consider, or where in the stated guideline that's for us to consider. Because it does, I agree with the applicant, I do think that those terms, height, scale, roof shape, qualify or reference the existing house, but the guideline doesn't say anything about the streetscape or the other buildings. Sorry, did staff catch that?
I'm sorry.
No,
Can you repeat that?
that's all right. In a nutshell, you do make good points in the recommendations, just trying to connect the dots between recommendations reference to streetscape and proximity to the street and the other houses along Victoria Street with the guideline for outbuildings. Because it does seem to specifically reference the existing house. And doesn't talk about its compatibility with the rest of the neighborhood or the streetscape or anything like that. So where in the guideline should we read to consider what you've referenced in your recommendations?
Context is always considered with new construction. I mean, this is a new construction project.
All right. Thank you.
And I did forget to mention, I'm sorry, the Neighborhood Association for Cottontown sent a letter in that was sent to you guys. And someone from the neighborhood was here, but they had to leave.
Sorry, all these ambiguous terms in these guidelines, maybe we need to ask the residents to maybe think about clarifying some of these. But, okay, scale and that seems to be staff's primary concern is the scale, right? Whether that's as it relates to the existing house or other houses on the street. Can you explain to me, not being an architect or an engineer or anything like that, what it means to be compatible in scale to the existing house?
I mean, in my mind, I'm gonna let them answer too, but it's even like our previous case.
Right.
I mean,
right.
it's a very similar situation. It's like, is it perceived to be a true addition or accessory or?
Yeah,
is
well,
it
there, I
equal?
mean, I think.
I'm just saying that, I
Yeah,
think the
the
scale,
problem I
and
had-
Rachel can
well,
answer, yeah.
Not the problem I had, but I guess the concern was the it has to be subordinate, right? Whatever that means. But here, scale, I'm just asking generally from staff's perspective, what is, I guess, explain what it means to be compatible in scale to the existing house.
Yeah, are we talking about square footage or just?
With an
the way it
outbuilding,
appears
I
from
would
the
say that it is
streetscape?
definitely, should be smaller than the house.
Okay. Square footage or footprint?
I mean, either.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the streetscape, it doesn't look out of scale. But if you talk about square footage or footprint, that may be a different measure, but just the streetscape elevation we have in here, to me, doesn't look out of scale. Maybe the setback is what the problem is, but do you have the streetscape
It is
slide
the
deck?
scale in relation to the proximity to the street. So if this was on a much larger lot and could be pushed further back, it would not be an issue.
The yellow lines on the site plan, those are the property lines.
That's from our GIS, so it's not fully accurate, but it's, I mean, roughly.
It doesn't look accurate because
I think I have this, the
existing
actual
house is right
site
on the
plan.
line.
Somewhere, there it
How many
is.
square feet you say the new addition is?
Footprint or total space or total living space? The apartment would be 896, so that the footprint is basically 896. And then,
And it's bigger than the house it is on the corner, right? It's bigger than the house on the corner.
if you count the square footage of the garage and add that to the square footage of the apartment, then it makes, what did you say, Rachel?
A little over 1,700.
It's over 1,700, and the square footage of the living space inside the house, not including the front porch, not including attic space, which will eventually be living space, the square footage is just shy of 1,500.
Well, I guess the reason it's bigger than what, to meet today's standard of design. Our cars are bigger and bathrooms are bigger. That's the reason.
So please go ahead. Yeah, so in my mind, at least, what I was concerned with footprint, or was square footage, was just the footprint. Because I guess if I were to add a second story or just cut in with dormers, my house doesn't change, but now all of a sudden I have 2,500 square foot. And so not changing the floor print of the main house would then resubordinate the accessory dwelling unit, and that just seems strange to me, that I could not change the floor plan of the primary unit, and that would change the relationship it has with the accessory dwelling unit, which is why in my mind I thought footprint was the better metric or the better guide, in which case we're looking at just shy of 900 square feet for the ADU versus just over 1,800 square feet for the main house.
Any other questions?
Getting back to the staff recommendation, so am I reading that correctly that have you already discussed with staff reducing the size to bring it within compliance? And if so, what that means from staff's perspective?
Reducing.
Sorry, there's a comment in staff's recommendation that should we agree with their comments, the overall scale of the accessory building be reduced, they're happy to continue working with you to make the overall size of the building in keeping with the guidelines. Is that something you've discussed with them? Sometimes we have applicants who say, yeah, understand the recommendation, and if push comes to shove, I'm happy to work with them. Is that?
No, so this was all kind of late, and I've been out of town the last week, so I just got back. But with just some back of paper math, if I was to do it such that it would be able to be more or less in line with the adjacent duplexes and maintaining the sort of 5 feet from the back of the property line, and then if we want to keep it architecturally compatible with the house, therefore keeping the same pitch of the roof, if you move it back this much on the floor, that's going to take it's going to be shorter so that it can have the same degree. So it would ultimately reduce it down to something like I think I did the math, something like a 700 square foot apartment. Or no, sorry, not 700. It was, I'd have to redo the math, but it would make it to a pretty small function. It would functionally be a studio apartment with a oversized 1-car garage. Yeah.
And that would or wouldn't be acceptable?
I don't think that would be acceptable, no.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant? I'm going to see if there's anybody from the public to speak. Anybody? All right, thank you. Is anybody here from the public to speak on this case? I think staff mentioned we did receive some emails. No? Okay. All right, I'm going to open it back open to the commissioners. Any discussion? No? Then I can open it for a motion.
Well, if we use that square footage measure, I see that the thing is not out of scale with the original house. And I think the only problem is the setback from the street. And we saw his other example from the one around the corner where the actual accessory structure was closer to the street. So I wouldn't have a problem.
Just to clarify, that's a different lot. It's not an accessory structure for the house next door.
Lot.
It's a
Well,
separate
we're
lot.
talking about the whole streetscape as our context, so
That's not on this street.
it's a different street.
I
but
think so.
we're-
We're talking about the one
That's
on-
our frame of reference, right, is streetscape, whether there's a property line or not. We're looking at the whole streetscape.
Right. But the building he showed on the computer was not on this street.
It was the same design district, though?
It was in the district.
Rachel, is what you're saying, the picture we saw was a primary structure? Or,
All right. I can't speak to the history of that structure. I don't know, but it is a primary structure today.
okay,
I do not know what it was originally.
thank you.
And I think that staff was pointing out it's on its own lot, whereas this one is trying to, get accommodated in what's readily available, which we understand. So, there's kind of two issues here that the staff points out. One is the streetscape and one is just the size and scale to the original structure too, right? So I guess we're looking at all that in context. What are you going to say?
Well, not to suggest that's an arbitrary consideration, whether it's separately platted or not. Yeah, I can't speak to that, but I guess if we're considering the design, then, well, because then in that case, there is no primary structure to consider, it's scale in relation to. So maybe it is relevant, the separate platting. Sure.
Yep, you can come back.
And I think, yeah, just to add my 2 cents on this, I think my hunch would be, I haven't historically looked up, based on my knowledge of the neighborhood, my hunch is historically that would have been an ADU, but at some point I bet it got sold off. But regardless, I think if we're looking at scale and if we're concerned with context of streetscapes, regardless if it's on its own plat now, it would be an example of a garage with ADU apartment, or a garage with apartment above it, whether it's ADU or primary, that sits closer to the sidewalk than the immediately adjacent structures. So.
Apologize for all the questions and comments. I guess the packet we have provides us the guideline for outbuildings. Can staff speak to what we would consider if it weren't an outbuilding, if it were a primary structure? Remember, we don't even need to get into
Yeah,
that.
the guidelines for new construction consider setback, scale, massing, rhythm of openings, roof shape.
Much more restrictive.
Yeah.
What you're saying, okay.
Yeah, and the outbuilding guideline is part of that larger set of guidelines.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No one? Come. I'm going to open it up for a motion.
I will make a motion for approval of the request for certificate of design approval regarding the 2320 Marion Street property, TMS 09113-07-02 in the Cottonwood Bellevue Architectural Conservation District.
Second.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg? Yes. Ms. Jaco?
No.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Salibi?
No.
Motion passes.
Okay, all right, next case.
All right, this is 914 Sims Avenue, which is a request for a certificate of design approval for an exterior change in Oakwood Court Architectural Conservation District. This one-story brick veneer home was built in 1939 and is a contributing building to the Oakwood Court Architectural Conservation District. The house features a cross-gable roof, 6/1 windows, and an arched stoop, and a prominent front chimney. Changes to the house included side porch enclosure and a rear addition. The owner is currently requesting to paint the historic brick veneer. Guidelines for masonry state identify, retain, and preserve masonry features that are important to defining the overall historic character of the building, such as walls, brackets, railings, cornices, door pediments, steps, and columns, joint unit size, tooling, bonding patterns, coatings, and color. The exterior of the house is clad in a variegated brick. The windows have brick sills, and the arch over the front stoop is accented with a rowlock course. The exterior chimney includes a brick pattern and a darker colored brick, which forms a rectangle using header bricks on the sides and a soldier course along the top and bottom. As an unpainted house, the brick and patterning would have been chosen deliberately as a design feature at the time of construction. Preserving the original color helps maintain historic and architectural integrity of the home. Painting the brick would alter the historic character and distort original features of the house and is thus not in keeping with the guidelines. There have been changes to the house, including the enclosure of the side porch and a brick addition off the back of the house. Here you can see the side porch. It does appear that the brick in the enclosure was chosen to match the original brick. However, the mortar lines on the infill and newer bricks do not match the historic brick. Likewise, some areas, the infill brick was not keyed in. Along with thicker mortar, it makes it more obvious a break from the original brick to the infill brick. As seen from the street, the brick on the rear of the house appears to neither match mortar nor color of the original. Which you can see here towards the very, very back, and that is all you can see of the addition, I believe, from the street. While the variation in old and new brick may be aesthetically bothersome, these are not uncommon alterations for older houses that have survived multiple owners and their various renovations. Careful consideration must be given to decisions that alter historic features, as some are either difficult to reverse or irreversible. Painting brick not only alters a historic character-defining feature, it creates a lifetime maintenance issue that also has the potential to damage historic brick and the house as a whole in the long run by trapping moisture. Staff finds the proposal to paint the brick at 914 Sims Avenue is not in keeping with section 6.4 of the Oakwood Court ACD guidelines and recommends denial of the request. And there, I did include in your packet, but also here there are photos that the applicant submitted. The applicant is here to speak. And they did provide an email that I forwarded, that was forwarded to the DDRC prior to the meeting.
Any questions of staff before we bring the applicant up?
This house is located in Oakwood.
Would the applicant like to come up, please? Hi.
I am Sharon Heiligman.
And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
Absolutely, yes. First of all, I want to thank Rachel through this process because I've learned a lot, and she was very helpful and very responsive. But since moving into the house, we just moved in April, we've noticed the variation in the brick is pretty significant. The back addition is not variegated, it's a solid color. And the inlay portions are very obvious. There's one side of the house where I think that they filled in a window. And then where they filled it on the porch, you can see where the pillars were originally, and now there's brick. And so our proposal was to paint the brick white. There were two cases that were mentioned by Rachel along the way. One was 1209 Princeton Street, in which there was mismatched brick through additions, and the other was on Maple Street, where the house had conflicting inlay brick. And we have both of those precedents in my house. I've got both. So I have the inlay and I have the addition that don't match. So I would like to paint the addition white, or the whole house white, so that it doesn't show.
Can I ask you, are there any houses in Oakmont painted?
There's about, we counted the other day, and there's at least 12 to 14. It's hard to tell where exactly.
Photograph of the houses?
I'm sorry?
Do you have photographs of those houses?
No, I did not bring those. No, but they're all the way around the corner. I mean, the entire neighborhood intermingled.
Have you gone through the process of cleaning or having somebody come to try to look at it or see what you can do to preserve it?
I can't do anything with the different color, which the addition is it's not variegated, it's all solid, so it stands out completely. And the part of it is the mortar joints are just larger, so it shows up.
I mean, we have several cases of this nature, and typically it's in a really horrible state of disrepair, which.
No, the previous owner took very good care of this home.
Right. And is the addition in the back there, Rachel, here in the picture, is that viewable? We're looking from the road here. Is this all viewable? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you see between the third and the fourth window back, where it changes, that's where it's actually a solid brick. It's not. It's one color. It was like the most prominent color, but it's not very good.
Have you tried pressure washing?
No, not yet. No, sir.
I mean, on a mild setting, you can almost make it match, but there's no guarantee.
Right. And since, there was precedent given the other homes that were allowed to paint, the two situations where they've allowed them or given them approval to paint, they did have mismatched infilled, so that's why we went ahead and applied as is. And, we did present an alternative. I think that's the email. One of the mentions, and first of all, we love the historic nature of the neighborhood. That's why we were drawn there. And was the prominent chimney in front. And in my email, I proposed I would even leave that chimney the prominent brick color and paint, and leave the chimney the brown, so that you can still get a flavor of that architectural design, because it's beautiful. And then paint the house. I'd leave that the brown and paint the house. And that there's an actual picture of that. I had an artist render that, and that's an actual picture in the email, so you could see what it looks like.
We had a case very similar to yours on Sims. Now, you're on Stark Street?
I'm on Sims.
You're at Sims?
Yeah, 914 Sims.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it. We had a case there, it was a two-story, further to the right where your house is, and it was denied painting. They were trying to be consistent with the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was back in 2018,
Okay.
just so you know.
Any other questions of the applicant? Well, thank you. Was there anybody here from the public who wished to speak on this case? Was there anything received on this one, Rachel? I'm trying to remember.
It was just the email that the owner
Okay.
sent.
Yes, right, I did see that. Okay. Any conversation or clarifications with staff and commissioners?
The picture is just not enough there to make a decision.
Well, I mean, those of us who are here, everything's got its own story and situation of disrepair. I understood.
Yeah.
All right, if there's no other questions, anybody have any questions, staff or anybody? I'll open it up for a motion. You want to go out with a bang?
Tough.
Okay. All right, I'll make the motion. I make a motion to deny the request for a certificate of design for approval for an exterior change at the property at 914 Sims Avenue, according to the Oakwood Court Architectural and Conservation District.
Second.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg? Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Yes.
And Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Last case. Stark Street. Every staff gets a member to point today. All right.
All right, last one. Getting there. All right, everybody ready? Okay. All right, this one is for 2353 Stark Street. It is a request for a certificate of design approval for construction of a duplex. The current proposal is for construction of a two-story duplex. The proposed design is for a square building with a 6-bay wide front facade on a slightly raised brick foundation. There will be a two-story, full-width front porch spanning the length of the facade with 2 central front doors, 1 for each unit. The porch roof would be a low-pitch shed roof supported by several square porch posts. The porch and front facade will both be one contiguous plane with no variation, creating a boxy front. All windows on the front facade will have a 6/1 pane configuration. The left and right facades will each be 3 bays deep with a total length of 40 feet from the front of the porch to the rear of the building. The duplex will be clad in hardy board or cement fiberboard in horizontal orientation. The proposed design will be placed on the corner of Stark and Height Streets, where all 4 facades will be highly visible. This structure is significantly larger than the other houses along Stark Street, with the front facade being 44 feet wide and side facades 40 feet deep. All of the other houses on the block have narrower facades, with the largest houses measuring between 26 feet and 30 feet in width. This is also at the intersection of Height and Stark, which has lost a lot of its original fabric, leaving many open lots and fields and few buildings there, particularly few none that are 2 stories. Staff feels that the proposed design is not compatible with the massing and scale of the other houses on this block and have requested a revised design that would break up the massing. Staff has recommended several options to the applicant that would break up the facade, and the applicant has chosen to bring the current design forward. So I will try to just get to the most important guidelines here. So for overall principles for new construction, a new construction should be consistent with existing buildings along a street in terms of height, scale, proportion, and rhythm of openings, setbacks, orientation, and spacing. So for height, there are many 2-story structures in this area. We are not contesting the height of this structure, but overall size and scale, the size and scale of a new building shall be visually compatible with surrounding buildings. Do not construct buildings that disrupt the existing scale of the area. The proposed building disrupts the scale and rhythm of the streetscape. This duplex is larger than many of the structures in this section of Old Shandon Lower Waverly. While there are some 2-story buildings on the street, While there are some 2-story structures on the street, none of them have as wide of a facade as this design, the closest being 14 feet shorter. While the height of the building is common for this district, the width is far greater than any others on the block and is not visually compatible with its neighboring buildings. For a building of this scale to be compatible with the neighboring structures, it will need to have some dynamic details to break up the facades. The proposed size and scale of this building is not in keeping with the guidelines. Massing. Arrange the mass of a new building, the relationship of solid components, example walls, columns, etc., to open spaces, windows, doors, arches, so that it is compatible with the existing historic buildings on the block or street. Breaking up uninteresting box-like forms into smaller varied masses is essential to managing the character of the streetscape. Do not construct single monolithic forms that are not relieved by variations in massing. This design is very boxy, with little variety on any of the 4 facades, all of which are highly visible. The 2-story porch is very linear and emphasizes the monolithic form of the house. There are 3 2-story houses on the block, but those buildings do not appear as monolithic because they are in an appropriate scale for the block and have more architectural diversity. The one other house that is 2 stories on this block that has a 2-story porch is 27 feet wide and has 3 bays, whereas this is 44 feet wide and has 6 bays. This is a 17-foot difference. This includes a variety of cladding materials, roof forms, window types, and porches. For a building of this scale to be compatible with the neighboring structures, it needs to have dynamic details to break up the facades. Staff recommends breaking up the massing of the front facade visually by reducing the porch to 1 story, as well as adding a decorative vertical band down the center of the facade between the units. These features would break up the massing in a way that is more compatible with the district. The rear facade will also be highly visible, and as designed, it is monolithic with a small recessed entrance in the center. It has no detailed architectural features, creating a flat horizontal plane that is not typical for the district. This facade should include a defined roofed rear porch or porches leading to the back doors. While this does not have to be elaborate, it should reflect the architectural form and details of porches in historic homes. Number 4, directional expression. Site the entrance of the building so that it is compatible with surrounding buildings. Horizontal buildings can be made to relate to more vertical adjacent structures by breaking the facade into smaller masses that conform to the primary expression of the streetscape. Do not construct strongly horizontal or vertical facade expressions. The majority of the buildings on this street are oriented with the narrow end of the structure facing the street and extending back into the lot. Conversely, this proposed design has a much wider front facade than its neighboring buildings. This is emphasized by the full-width front porch. As stated in the guidelines, horizontal buildings can be made to relate to more vertically oriented structures by breaking the facade into smaller masses. This can be done with architectural elements and design features. Ideally, a building of this scale would be physically broken up in mass. However, architectural elements can be added to break up the horizontal emphasis. So again, we do recommend having a one-story porch with a division down the center of the structure. Setback is also a concern. The guidelines say that setback, locate the new building on the site so that the distance of the structure from the right-of-way is similar to adjacent structures. Do not violate the existing setback pattern by placing buildings in front of or behind existing facade lines. The applicant has planned for a 4-foot setback. New construction in the district should be similar to adjacent buildings, continuing the established pattern. The neighboring house has a setback of just over 5 feet, but all houses on this part of the block average about 9 to 9.5 feet back from their respective property lines. Placing this house at a 4-foot setback is not in keeping with the pattern of the block and would exaggerate the large massing of this building by having it so close to the property line and out of proportion with the rest of the block. Given the size of this building, staff suggests that there be at least a 9-foot setback to be more in line with the streetscape. Sense of entry. Place the main entrance and the associated architectural elements, such as porches, steps, etc., so they are compatible with surrounding structures. The main entrance shall be constructed with covered porches, porticos, or other architectural forms that are found on historic structures on the block or street. Do not construct facades with no strong sense of entry. The front porch will be the primary entrance for the house. It will be 8 feet deep and span both the first and second stories. While porches are common in the district, the scale of this 2-story porch is not compatible with its neighbors. Staff recommends reducing the size of the porch to 1 story to minimize its overall scale and be in keeping with the guidelines. The rear entrance will also be highly visible and needs additional architectural elements to break up the massing and come into compliance with the guidelines. This should include a defined roof for the rear porch or porches leading to the back doors. While this does not have to be elaborate, it should reflect the architectural forms and details of back porches in the historic homes in the district. We find that sections 7 through 9 are in compliance with the guidelines. And to complete this, staff finds that the proposed new construction at 2353 Stark Street is not in compliance with Section 3 of the Old Shandon Lower Waverly Protection Guidelines, and recommends granting a certificate of design approval only with the following conditions. The house should have a front setback of at least 9 feet from the property line. The front porch should be broken up to mitigate the monolithic design and overall scale of the structure. The porch will be 1 story with a decorative band board between the 2 units. The rear entrance should be enhanced to provide a stronger sense of entry, including a porch, roof, or other features. All material choices for outstanding items will be deferred to staff to work out with the applicant. All other details deferred to staff. So just to point out a few things, these are some images of the intersection, and as I mentioned, there has been a lot of loss of architectural buildings in this area, so there really are a lot of vacant lots around it, and having a large monolithic 2-story building is not in compliance with the buildings on the streetscape. On the left is the actual corner of Haight and Stark, so looking down Haight with Stark Street going up to the left. The center picture is from about mid-block on Stark Street, looking downhill to where this would be constructed. And then the last picture is from the bottom of the hill, looking up towards the mid-block. I also think that this photograph shows just how vacant a lot of the lots are around it and how there's not a lot there to anchor this structure. We've got, then we do have the size of the structure all together on the lot. And then also, these might be hard to see, but we did measure, at least through GIS, the setback of the other houses on this block. So it is showing down at the corner lot would be where this is suggested to go. The building next to it is just about 6 feet of the setback, but most of the other buildings on the block are at least 7, ranging up to 11, 12 foot setbacks. So having it at 4 feet would be definitely out of keeping with the district and with the block here.
Show me the overall site plan, the building map, where the house is, the map of Columbia. Okay, hold on. I'm not sure where that is. You said it's Lower Waverly?
Yes, so it's a couple blocks off of Millwood, well, not Millwood.
Oak Street and Stark Street.
MLK, yeah, I'm like Millwood and Green Street, MLK Park. Yeah.
I can't read it.
I know, I can't zoom in on the larger map. But if you were to take Height Street up, if you went one direction, you'd go to MLK Park. If you go the other, it would take you up to Millwood or Sedger Bay there.
You said there are other two-story homes nearby?
There are in the district. On this block, there are 3 two-story houses, and they're all at the top of the hill. So if you sort of look, the picture all the way on the right is from the bottom of the hill where the lot is, looking up. So you really wouldn't be able to see any of those other two-story buildings from that location. They are up the hill, but they're at mid-block and further up.
Yeah, the area around it is getting to be undeveloped. There's police precinct was on that corner of Woodrow and Millwood, and the whole area is getting vacant.
Yes, there's a lot of vacant properties there.
Any other questions of staff at this point? Looks like the applicant's here. Would you like to come on up?
Hi, I'm Philip Loffridge. I'm with the Wilson Company, the
Okay.
applicant.
And do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
I do.
Thank you.
The staff proposals, of course, we submitted this as is. The staff proposals are not entirely wrong. With respect to the setback, the neighboring house is 6.2 feet. I believe we pulled that off of the city records, not the GIS. So we believe that the 9-foot setback is a little far. The 6.2 is, I believe that's, it would fit our building plan. In the overlay districts, there is no, you get to set, as the commission, you get to set the front setback, but the zoning ordinances require that our side setback be 50% of whatever it is you set. If we go back to 9 feet, that's going to create some problems, some mechanical problems within the building, and 6.2 will line up with the neighboring house. Dressing up the back of the house, I think is probably a pretty good idea. The 2-story porch is designed as an amenity for the occupants. We would like to have that. There is some precedent in the neighborhood for 2-story porches. 23 Stark has a double porch. With respect to the scale and the mass of the house, if you look throughout the neighborhood, it's not uncommon to have a 35-foot wide lot in the neighborhood. This is a 52-foot wide lot. So it's correct that most of the houses in the neighborhood are more narrow homes than run deeper on the lot. This is just a much wider, much more square lot, and we're fitting the house on the lot. 904 Oak Street has a house that's 64 feet wide. It's not on the same street, it's in the neighborhood. 2311 Stark, the house, the lot is 47 feet wide, which is again a little wide for the neighborhood, and the house on that lot is 38 feet, so it's covering much of the frontage of the lot. So I don't believe we're entirely without precedent.
Are both those houses in this district? Sorry, we're getting later, so I'm just going to interject what I want now.
They are in the district.
Okay.
We focused really on this block.
Gotcha, just wondered.
Those are my general comments.
So of staff's comments here, if I'm hearing you, the only one that you could see applying is the first one, but only going to 6.2 feet. But the front porch, the rear entrance, did you have any, what was your comments on that?
We don't have any problem adjusting dressing up the rear entrance. It is visible from the street. I guess an alternative solution would be to fence it so that it's not as visible, but, I believe fences running along corner lots have their own issues, just from an attractability standpoint, or attractiveness standpoint, I'm sorry.
Where was the proposed parking on this plan here?
It's at the back of the lot off of Height Street.
I mean, I think it's exciting that you're doing this project in this area. It's greatly needed. I think staff has some really valid points, though, on some of the exterior and the aesthetics. I think we're willing to have a conversation about, whether it's 6.2 or 9, but I think some of the other points have some validity to them. I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around how we address that. I'll open it up for anybody's comments or questions to the applicant.
Yeah, with regard to the two-story porch, is that something you able to go with, just having a one-story porch, or is that something that's essential to your design?
Essential to the design would be the wrong characterization. It is.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's not mechanically essential.
Right.
It's not architecturally essential. It's intended as an amenity to the occupants. To have a second-story porch, which can be, used, it's not just decorative. It's a little more private, a little more secure. We just considered it a nice amenity.
You don't show any door on that balcony, Dalvin.
No, excuse me?
You not show a door on the balcony, Dalvin.
It's just behind that rail. The elevation, one of those windows would be a door.
So that'd be your exterior living space for rocking chairs or
Correct.
barbecue grills or whatever. Yeah.
Well, we wouldn't want them to put a grill on there because it might burn the place down.
And we still have a lower level porch going on here, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I think we can do something a little better on that, on the front. I do. I mean, this is a duplex. We're not housing 4 units or anything, right? I mean, this is a
Correct.
side-by-side.
It's a
Yeah.
duplex.
And so am I correct in interpreting this design that, or I guess this rendering, that the railing for the porches is not going to be like not have lattice, it's going to be a
It would be a picket rail,
picket rail? Okay.
not lattice. I say, I guess those will be some design details to still resolve with staff, but we've often put either pickets or like it's become popular, I don't know if it's within DDRC guidelines, but we call it hog wire. It's a wire. It has a top rail and has a 4x4 square pattern wire that you can see through. It's attractive. I don't know if it'd work well on the front of a house, but we can always do our traditional pickets.
Thank you.
I think the challenge is meeting what's going on in the neighborhood, of course. The ratio of the size to the lot, I mean, staff, do you have any comment on that? I mean, I know that things were mentioned, I mean, given the size of the lot in the corner, which, I mean, I think that is a valid point. Tell me your thoughts on that.
It's more for zoning to look at lot coverage ratios. We're more concerned of sort of the streetscape and how it's going to present, so that's why we're thinking of the setbacks and how it's going to be viewed there.
I mean, I don't know if I'd be as concerned about it if I liked the appearance to me to match more, you know? I think that's where I'm struggling personally. Okay.
So we've hit on a lot of the questions that I had. The first was going to be just about access to that second porch. So I guess one of the windows on each side of the duplex would ultimately be doors to access.
It would become a door, and I apologize, that elevation is not completely accurate because the upper porch would be accessible via a door.
And that I think there were pictures somewhere in this packet of other houses that did have two-story porches. Is that right?
That's correct.
The other thing that I was going to bring up has already been hit on. It looks like that the total width of the structure is about 44 feet.
Correct.
And given the width of the lot, that does seem to be consistent with how some of the other homes are built. Now, granted, a lot of that area sort of is vacant and unbuilt, so that is, I think that sort of helps your cause here, just that there's not really much to compare it to besides, many of the houses in that area seem to be run down and almost abandoned.
That is an unfortunate characteristic of the neighborhood, although I believe that characteristic is quickly changing with the new Ebenezer proposal, which is just up the hill from this. And, frankly, people like us coming into the neighborhood and building in there, I believe those vacant lots are not long for this world. So.
I was going to ask staff, when they talked about the setback of the 6.2, feelings one way or the other about that? I know you have the recommendation of 9, and they're currently at 4, right?
I think that we could work with that. I think it would be preferable if it's back a little further, just to match more of the street.
I'm trying to figure out a way that we could word it in such a way that you could work with staff to hopefully come up with a solution that staff likes without you having to come back to here, okay?
Understand.
So that would be a minimum of a 6.2, when I say like a minimum, right? And then, but it would still need to address these other factors that are staff's identified here, okay?
The 6.2 goes back to the zoning. So if we go too far, then I'm going to end up having to try to get a zoning variance on my side setback because I want to have to take enough space out of the building. I can take a foot out of the building. For example, if we go to 6.2, if my setback becomes 50% of that, I now have a 3.1 side setback rather than a 2-foot setback. I can easily take a foot out of this building. I can probably take as many as 2 feet out of the building. I have some mechanical limitations if I go beyond that. My stair landings per building code have to be a certain depth. And if I start to narrow the building, it's going to take depth out of my stair landing and I won't meet code.
Right. I'm just trying to find an avenue for you to continue working with staff on this, okay?
Understand.
All right. Everybody feels what I'm trying to accomplish here, right?
Well, I understand the setback. My concern is traffic on Stark Street and High Street. Which street has a stop sign?
Which street has?
Which street has a stop sign on the corner?
Oh, wow.
I believe both of them may.
Is it a four-way?
Well, look.
I don't see a stop sign.
Just Stark.
Okay.
Yeah, probably just Stark because it's not a four-way intersection there.
I just don't want to get too close to and compromise the sight line of traffic.
And our our curb access is on the back of the lot away from that intersection. So I think from a traffic standpoint, that's the best location for it.
Well, we
Anybody
certainly,
from the public here to speak? I just wanted to find out until we keep talking. Is anybody here to speak on this? Okay, we have one. All right, just wanted to make sure. Do you have any other questions for the applicant at this point? No? All right, thank you. All right. Jim, come on up. Guess I swore you in earlier.
Jim
Still
Daniel,
apply?
I have a question for the applicant. Is this affordable housing or market rate housing? Let me make my soapbox here. This is another block in the gentrification of the MLK neighborhood. This group has built a series of houses on Green Street that overwhelm the lots on which they build. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Gregg is one of the owners. I think he's got 8 more lots that something's going to happen with. I think this is like 1803, is too big for the location. But the biggest concern, and this is a city concern, is the gentrification of the historic black neighborhoods in Columbia. People like these guys are in the student housing market. That's what this area is turning into. And it's a real disservice to the historic black neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, we got to stay focused in our purview. That's not the purview of this board. Ours is the architectural component of it. Would you like to speak too?
Yes.
As the applicant?
Alec
Okay,
Gregg,
state
I'm
your
the
name.
owner.
All right, and do you swear to tell the truth during this proceeding?
Yes.
All right.
So that's out of the purview of what we're talking about here. But we've, to back up a little bit, my siblings and I inherited some vacant lots in this neighborhood that my dad owned when he passed away. So we wanted to see this neighborhood improve. We've all worked in the neighborhood. I live down the street. So I've had a lot of experience in the neighborhood. And since we had these lots and they're empty, we don't feel like we're gentrifying, as Jim likes to point out. But we think this is improving the neighborhood with these designs. We've got 2315, 2317 Green Street that have already been built. We see those as a great addition to the neighborhood, adding a lot of beds in the neighborhood. It helps 5 Points, helps the walkability of the area. We've got 2 more approved, one directly across the street at 969 Height Street, and then another one at 2327 Start Street, which is further up the street. And in all of that, we've kind of worked off the designs that we built from the start and improving them as we go. And with this one, it's tough because you've got vacant lots everywhere to the right, north vacant, south vacant, another vacant lot. And then if you look at all the lot sizes, like Richard pointed out, or Philip pointed out, they're all skinny and very long.
Right.
And with this one, it's a different situation because you've got wide and short. So we had to work with that to create something that'll work there, and it's something that we can build that's feasible for us to build. So the issue with the second story porch is walking through the neighborhood. Of course, there's the house that's right up the street that's got the 2-story porch. And I've always thought that'd be a great addition to a house in this neighborhood. There's only a couple of them, so it's a little variation you're adding to the neighborhood. And the blocky design it's tough just because the way the lot is construed. If it was a little bit longer, we could push the building back and make it skinnier so it looks like all the other ones, but we weren't able to achieve that and get parking and then green space behind the house for residents to use and activate.
Were you agreeable to working with staff on these items that they've mentioned that we discussed earlier?
Yes, ma'am. I think the setback, I think we're completely fine with the 6.2. If we go further back from that, then that distracts from, if you look at the site plan, the green space that's back there, and it really squeezes it. So that's why we wanted to keep it as close to the street and give it some street presence, because it's a prominent corner, so if you have a building that's prominent on the corner, I think that says a lot about the area. And I think if we do this, it'll create more variation in the neighborhood as people continue to build, as we continue to build more and more of these. It'll improve the design and create diversity in design. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Any questions of this applicant? Okay.
Not for the applicant, but turning back to a question for staff. In the recommendations, when you say the front porch should be broken up to mitigate the monolithic design and overall scale, can you give us an idea of what that might look like?
Sure. We did work with the designer and had a couple different scenarios. So it's one that they had presented to us at one point with a one-story porch. And our recommendation at that point had just been to add something down the center to break it up just a little bit more. So we've seen an example of what could be there. And that's one of the reasons that we were suggesting that, because that's something that we had considered working with them, working with the applicant.
Okay, so speaking to that, we came with a couple examples of what that might look like. I don't know if you've seen this one. So I'll pass these around.
Yeah. I think, I mean, what we're hearing is you'll work with staff to come up with a better solution. I think that's what we want to hear, right?
Yes. And I think the intent is to keep those second-story porches, activate outside spaces. I think that's important. I think that's something that we wish we would have done on the Green Street properties to activate it more. But that was our first go-around, and we're improving as we go. But I think this would be a great feature in the neighborhood to have that second-story porch.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions, commissioners? Is that a no? Okay. Open it up for a motion.
I'll make a motion to grant certificate of design approval only with the following conditions. I will change the first condition to make the setback at least 5 feet to be consistent with the neighboring property. The front porch should be broken up to mitigate the monolithic design and overall scale of the structure. The porch will be, actually, I want the motion to reflect that a two-story porch will be allowed. The rear entrance should be enhanced to provide stronger sense of entry, including a porch, roof, or other features. All material choices for outstanding items be deferred to staff to work out with the applicant. All other details deferred to staff.
Mr. Greenberg, did you mean when you were talking about the porch, two-story porch will be allowed, were you talking about the new design in terms of it being broken up, or were you talking about the original rendering?
I think to be clear, I would read exactly what's here, because that'll give them the leeway to work with them. I mean, any of these would fit into that, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And I want to, because there was an amendment I need to make on your front part, but.
I apologize for not being clear. My intent
Yeah.
was to strike the portion that says it would be one story.
I don't know if we know yet what it's going to be, where it finally ends up. I mean, I don't know. So anyway, I don't know, whatever language makes it as flexible as possible for them to maneuver with them to a better concept. So however that is, I don't know, staff, help us out.
My interpretation was that the intent was that the front porch should be broken up to mitigate the monolithic design and overall scale of the structure, period. Striking any restriction on the front porch as it relates to 1 or 2 stories.
Okay, I mean, I think that's reasonable. Okay, yeah.
So yeah,
But we're-
really that my intent was that and just reducing the distance of the setback. from 9
Right.
feet to
Minimum of 6.2, which is where I want, yeah, that's what, we need to say minimum of 6.2. I'm not sure exactly what you stated, but let's make sure we clarify that.
my intent for that was actually to be, I guess, 5 feet.
Well, the neighbor is 6.2. Where did the 5 feet come from? Did I miss that?
That's in, it's in the 5th paragraph setback in, I guess it's page 4 of this application. The neighboring house has a setback of just over 5 feet.
Okay, I'm looking at the diagram. It says 6.2. Help me out here.
It is, the diagram would be more correct because that's based on our GIS
All right.
map.
So if you want to do it, just say state to at least where the, the neighboring house is at, since we're not exactly sure what the number is. That way it'll just make the motion clearer,
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so the house should have a front setback of at least the same depth as the neighboring property or
Or more, right, okay, that's good, yeah. Oh, that's
You
good,
good on the motion? If so, I'll second.
I think so.
Mr. Broom,
Yes.
Mr. Greenberg,
yes.
Ms. Jaco,
Yes.
Mr. Lee Decker,
Yes.
Mr. Salibi.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Yeah, that was some teamwork for the dream work there, guys. All right, I know, we're all a little punchy there. All right, other business, Amy.
So, we can do that.
Oh, my goodness.
This is Mr. Broom's last meeting.
Yeah, I know,
That's
right?
where
Everybody
he's
left.
going to be the next time we have a DDRC meeting, is sitting on his porch.
Oh,
I was texting my girlfriend.
I just don't know who's going to sit to the right of me, because I think for 3 years you've been right there. I know.
Yes, I have to say, Mr. Broom has been one of our most faithful members, and we owe quorum to you many more times than I can count, and we so appreciate that diligence.
I was running maybe one, maybe 2 times.
Yeah,
One I forgot,
yeah,
and one I was sick.
right.
Yes.
That's not bad over the run that you've had. You've hung in there while we were waiting for new appointees and went way over where you were intended, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, definitely.
So,
No, thank you, Bob.
Remember the COVID,
yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't even read lips.
Oh, we were doing all the virtual? Yeah, that was wild.
Well, we wish you a happy retirement from the DDRC. So, and thank you very much. And
Thank you for the ride.
of course, yes, absolutely.
Any
Yeah,
other
those are monthly reports for all of y'all right there. Yes, we will want that back. And also, we do have our downtown Columbia strategic plan and design meeting. It's feedback from the consulting team, who's been really excellent. They have some very exciting ideas, and so we're having a public meeting on August 1st. So one is at 11 to 1:30, and another one is from 4 to 6:30. And we're asking people to come and give feedback on the consultants' ideas. And I mean, it's really exciting, some of the things they're proposing.
It's at the convention center?
Yes.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, so we encourage y'all to come and share the news and bring some other folks. We want as many people there as we can get. And anything else? Okay.
All right, I guess with that, we motion to adjourn. Bob, that's your favorite part? Yeah, okay.
I'm about to lose my voice.
Oh, you all right? Well, we'll adjourn.
I almost not made it. I almost not made it.
Someone give me a second. I'm adjourning the meeting. Thank you.